Welcome, welcome. You're here at Potter Vibes. Today we present to you, what if Tonks kissed Harry after he saved her at age 9 and her magic refused to let any other witch near him? Like and subscribe if you want more awesome stories. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Chapter 1, The Sparks Before the Fire. The storm came in from the east, the way the worst ones always did, rolling over the neat suburban rooftops of Little Whinging like it had a personal grudge. By 7 in the evening the gutters were running and the sky had gone the color of a bruise, and every sensible person on Privet Drive had pulled their curtains and settled in for the night. Harry Potter was not on Privet Drive. He was 3 streets over, sitting on the curb outside a corner shop that had closed an hour ago, eating the end of a chocolate bar he'd found in his jacket pocket and watching the rain come down. He was 9 years old, small for his age, with knees that stuck out of his too large trousers and a pair of glasses that had been broken and retaped so many times the bridge was more tape than frame. His hair was doing what it always did, going absolutely everywhere, completely unconcerned with social expectations. He had a bruise on his left arm from where Dudley had decided that Wednesday afternoon required a bit of creative violence, and he had precisely nowhere to be. The Dursleys didn't worry when Harry was out. That would have implied they noticed. He finished the chocolate, folded the wrapper into a small tight square the way he always did with rubbish when there was no bin nearby, and watched a paper cup get carried down the gutter by the rain. There was something soothing about storms. The Dursleys stayed inside during storms. No one expected anything from anyone during storms. You could just sit on a curb and exist, and the rain would cover the sound of your thoughts. He'd been having a lot of thoughts lately. They weren't bad thoughts, exactly. Just big ones. Thoughts about the way Mrs. Fig's cat had floated off the pavement last week when Dudley's gang had tried to kick it, and how nobody had touched it, and how Harry's hands had been tingling for 20 minutes afterward. Thoughts about the time he'd ended up on the school roof without any memory of climbing there, because he'd been running from Piers Polkiss and then suddenly he hadn't been running at all. Thoughts about the fact that sometimes, when he was very still and very calm, he could feel something sitting behind his ribs like a coal that hadn't decided yet whether it wanted to burn. He was sitting with those thoughts and the rain when he heard the crack. It wasn't thunder. Thunder rolled and built and announced itself. This sound was sharp, a single syllable, like the world had been folded wrong and then snapped back into place. Harry's head came up. The tingling started in his palms immediately, and the coal behind his ribs shifted. Down the side street to his left, something was wrong. He didn't decide to go look. He just went, the way you breathe, automatically, without consulting the reasonable part of your brain that would have told you to stay on the curb and mind your own business. His trainers slapped through puddles and he rounded the corner into the alley between the bakery and the dry cleaners, and what he saw stopped him 4 steps in. There were 2 people in the alley. One was a girl, older than him, maybe 15 or 16, with hair that was currently bright pink in a way that had nothing to do with dye, crouched against the wall with blood on her forehead and her arm held at an angle that made Harry's stomach go tight. The other was a man, tall, with a dark coat that was wrong for the weather in a way Harry couldn't name, and he was pointing something at the girl. Something thin and pale, like a wand from a magic show except that it was made of actual wood and it was glowing at the tip with a light that had no business existing. "You're going to tell me where the boy is," the man said. His voice was calm, which was somehow worse than if he'd been shouting. "The mud-blood. The one they've hidden in this district. You're going to tell me, or I'm going to make the next hour very unpleasant for you." The girl's chin came up. She had a split lip and she was clearly in pain and she looked the man dead in the eye and said, "Go stick your wand somewhere creative." The man's arm moved. Harry didn't think. The coal in his chest ignited. What happened next was difficult to describe, partly because it happened very fast and partly because the part of Harry's brain responsible for description was entirely offline. There was heat in his hands, real, physical heat, not metaphor, and then there was light, a white-blue burst of it that came from somewhere between his palms and the air and nowhere, really, and it hit the man in the dark coat like a wall had decided to move sideways at speed. The man went up and back and came down against the opposite wall of the alley with a sound like a sack of wet cement, and he did not get up. The light died. The rain kept falling. Harry stood with his hands still out in front of him, both palms open, steam rising from his skin where the rain hit it. His glasses were fogged. His heart was doing something architectural and complicated, like it was trying to build a new room for this experience and didn't have the materials yet. The girl with the pink hair was staring at him. "Blimey," she said. "I don't," Harry started, then stopped. His voice came out steadier than he expected. "Is he dead?" The girl looked at the man on the ground, then back at Harry. "No. Stunned, or something close to it." "Your magics, that was your magic, wasn't it?" She pushed herself up the wall to standing and winced, clutching her arm. "How old are you?" 9. 9. She said it the way people said numbers they'd misread on a receipt. "Right. 9. And you that was a wandless blasting hex, roughly. Except about 4 times stronger than it should be." She looked at her own wand, which she was holding in her good hand. "I had a shield up." He pushed through it like it was tissue paper. "You pushed through his, whatever that was, like it wasn't there." Harry lowered his hands. The steam had stopped. His palms were completely fine, no burns, no marks, just the normal lines of a 9-year-old's hand. "Your arm," he said, because the angle was still bothering him. "Is it broken?" "Probably." She said it with the casual tone of someone reporting mild traffic. "I've broken it before. It's the left one, so." She paused. "I'm Tonks. Nymphadora Tonks, but if you call me Nymphadora I will do something petty and magical to your shoelaces." "Just Tonks." "Harry," he said. "Harry Potter." Something moved across her face at that name, a flicker of something he didn't have context for. Recognition, maybe, or something that sat next to it. But she didn't say anything about it, just looked him over with dark eyes that were currently the same bright brown as her eyebrows, which were the only part of her that matched her hair. "You go to Hogwarts?" he asked. "3rd year, yeah. Home for summer." She nodded at the man on the ground. "He's a Death Eater." "Was one, anyway. Technically they're supposed to be illegal now, since you know who fell, but some of them are still active. He was looking for a Muggle-born kid who lived somewhere nearby. I heard him asking around the market in Diagon Alley 2 days ago and I followed him. A beat. Which, in retrospect, was not my most strategic decision." "You followed a Death Eater by yourself?" "I'm very brave," Tonks said, with the absolute conviction of someone who was also very much 15 and had not fully thought this through. "Also stupid. Brave and stupid are often the same thing, have you noticed?" Despite everything, the unconscious man, the blood on her forehead, the broken arm, the rain, Harry found himself almost smiling. "What do we do with him?" "Someone will come. The Ministry has censors for underage magic use. They'll have felt that." She gestured vaguely at the scorch marks Harry had somehow left on the pavement, which he was only now noticing, from 3 counties over. She looked at him again with that same unsettled assessment. "Actually they'll probably come for you, not him. Underage magic. Except you're not of age so the trace isn't set yet, and also you're a Muggle raised so they'll have to." She made a complicated face. "It's a lot of bureaucracy. Point is, people are coming. Should we go?" "I should probably stay and give a statement." She shifted her weight and the arm made her hiss through her teeth. "You should probably, actually no. Stay. If you disappear they'll want to know who did this, and explaining it as accidental magic from a 9-year-old Muggle raised who's not in the system yet is a much better story than a rogue 3rd year who got in over her head. Which is what actually happened. Partially." She grinned, split lip and all. "You're the one who ended the rogue 3rd year's terrible decision with, again, wandless magic at age 9. So it worked out." The ministry arrived 6 minutes later, 2 witches in practical robes who took one look at the scene and started firing off spells Harry had no names for. They were efficient and professional and mildly alarmed in the contained way of people who were trained to be mildly alarmed and not show it more than that. They bound the man in the dark coat, sent a Patronus off somewhere, and then turned to Tonks with expressions that managed to convey both relief and something more complicated. "Aura Moody's going to hear about this," one of them said. She had short grey hair and a clipboard that had appeared from nowhere. "Moody will think it's funny," Tonks said. "Moody thinks everything that doesn't kill anyone is funny." The woman's gaze moved to Harry. "And you are?" "Harry Potter," he said. The clipboard nearly went in the puddle. The woman recovered with impressive speed. "Harry Potter. Age 9. Muggle raised." She looked at the scorch marks on the pavement, significant, black-edged, in a rough pattern that corresponded to where Harry had been standing. "And you produced that?" "He did," Tonks confirmed cheerfully. "Wandless. Unprompted. In the rain." "Right." The woman wrote something down. "We're going to need to contact your guardian, Anne. My guardians don't know about magic," Harry said. "Not defensively. Just factually. And they wouldn't want to." Another clipboard wobble, more expertly suppressed. "Be that as it may, he can come home with me," Tonks said, with the casual certainty of someone who had made this decision 5 seconds ago and was entirely committed to it. "My mum's a healer. She can fix my arm and look him over, and then we can sort out the paperwork in the morning when there are people awake who are actually senior enough to handle a Harry Potter situation." The woman with the clipboard looked at her colleague. The colleague looked back. Some entire conversation happened in that glance that had nothing to do with Harry or Tonks and everything to do with two people deciding whether this was their problem or whether it could be somebody else's. "Address?" the woman said. Tonks gave it. Harry didn't ask if he was allowed to come. He just came. The Tonks house was a short fluoride from Tonks's wand, the first time Harry had ever been in a fireplace and come out somewhere else, which was exactly as disorienting and remarkable as it sounds, and which he handled with the equanimity of someone who'd long ago decided that strange things happened around him and at some point you just had to go with it. It was a proper house, not too big, with the comfortable cluttered look of a place where people actually lived, books on most surfaces, a kitchen that smelled of something herby, shoes that didn't quite make it to the rack by the door. It was nothing like Privet Drive, which was clean the way hospitals were clean, aggressively and as a matter of principle. A woman came out of the kitchen at the sound of them arriving, saw Tonks's arm, said, "Dora, for the love of," and then saw Harry, and said nothing else for a moment. She had Tonks's eyes, dark and quick, but everything else was different, a steadiness to her, a kind of settled calm that Tonks would probably never develop no matter how old she got. "This is Harry," Tonks said. "Harry, this is my mum. She won't mind you being here." "I might have an opinion about being told what I think," Tonks's mother said, but it was mild, more habit than protest. She held out her hand to Harry. "Andromeda Tonks. And yes, you can stay. Sit down, there's tea on." She fixed Tonks's arm in the kitchen, wand moving in short precise strokes while Harry sat at the table with a mug he'd been given and watched. The bone setting looked uncomfortable but Tonks barely reacted, talking through it about the Death Eater and the alley and Harry's magic with the same relentless energy she'd had in the rain. Andromeda cleaned the cut on her daughter's forehead and then turned to Harry with the same quiet competence. "Any injuries?" "No." She checked anyway, running a gentle diagnostic spell that Harry saw as a faint shimmer over his skin. She paused when it crossed his hands. Her expression didn't change, but something sharpened in her eyes. "How long have you been doing wandless magic?" she asked. "I don't know. I don't do it on purpose. But tonight you did." He thought about it honestly. Tonight felt different. Tonight it was, on purpose, I think. I just didn't plan it. Instinctive application of deliberate intent. That's rather advanced for someone your age. She sat back. For someone any age, frankly. She looked at him the way Tonks had in the alley, that same unsettled, recalibrating look. Then she seemed to make a decision and let it go. You'll have a proper letter in 2 years. Hogwarts. I figured, Harry said. People keep accidentally letting things slip. Mrs. Fig. A couple of times. Andromeda's mouth curved slightly. Arabella. Of course. She stood up. I'm going to make some calls. You'll sleep in the guest room and we'll sort out the rest in the morning. She paused at the kitchen door. Thank you for helping my daughter. She would have been fine, Harry said, and meant it as a compliment, because Tonks had not looked like someone who was giving up. She would have been significantly less fine, Andromeda said, with the gentle precision of a woman who was also a healer and therefore had an opinion about bone fractures and wandless Death Eater magic. Tonks waited until her mother left the kitchen. Then she leaned across the table, fresh bandage on her head, newly set arm, hair cycling absently through pink and then red and then settling back on pink the way some people drummed their fingers. Can I ask you something? Sure. When you did that magic, what did it feel like? Harry turned the mug in his hands. It was a fair question and he tried to answer it fairly. Like, you know when you hold your breath for a long time. And then you let it out. Except it was in my chest and it was really hot and it went outward. He paused. It felt like it wanted to. Tonks was quiet for a moment. Magic that wants things, she said, half to herself. That's not nothing, that. She looked at him directly. You're going to be interesting at Hogwarts. Is that a warning? More of a preview. She grinned, and the split lip pulled, and she winced, and grinned again anyway. You probably saved my life tonight, you know. He was about to hit me with something nasty. I could feel it charging. Harry shrugged. He didn't know what to do with that framing. Saving someone's life seemed like a very large way to describe what felt like simply doing the only thing that was available to do. Tonks reached across the table and, quickly, impulsively, with the pure unself-conscious instinct of someone who ran entirely on feeling first, thought second, she pressed a kiss to his cheek. It was a child's kiss. The kind you'd give a sibling, quick and warm and gone in a second. Except. The coal in Harry's chest didn't just shift this time. It sang. Not a sound, not anything he could describe as sound, but something that resonated through every bone in his body, right down to the marrow, like a tuning fork finding its frequency after years of silence. His hands went flat on the table. The lights in the kitchen flickered. The mug cracked neatly down the middle, clean break, no shards, and the tea inside held its shape for a full 3 seconds before deciding it had better fall. Tonks pulled back, staring at him. Her hair had gone white. What, she said, was that? I don't know, Harry said. His voice was completely steady. His hands were warm. The coal in his chest was burning with the slow, contented certainty of a fire that had finally found its proper fuel and intended to stay lit. I really don't know. Outside, the storm was easing. The rain slowed to a whisper and then to almost nothing, and somewhere in the street a blackbird, confused by the clearing, started to sing in the dark. Andromeda made calls for 2 hours. Harry sat in the living room with a second mug. Tonks had given him the mug that said world's most average dad because it was the least cracked one, she explained, and it made her laugh, and listen to the muffled shapes of adult conversation from behind the study door. Tonks fell asleep on the sofa beside him, her pink-haired head tipping sideways, and he sat quietly and didn't wake her. He thought about the kiss. He thought about the singing. He thought about the way the lights had flickered and the mug had broken so cleanly it looked like it had been cut rather than cracked. He didn't feel frightened. That was the thing. He should, probably, something had happened that was clearly significant and clearly outside any experience he had reference points for. But fear required a kind of uncertainty that he didn't have right now. The thing in his chest was certain. He couldn't have told you certain of what, exactly, but the feeling itself had no doubt in it. He fell asleep eventually, without meaning to, sitting upright in the armchair with the world's most average dad mug still in his hand. In the morning he woke to the sound of an unfamiliar man's voice from the hallway, and voices plural, Andromeda and someone else, lower, more measured. He was awake fully and immediately in the way that children are when they sleep well somewhere other than home, and he stood up and went to the doorway and looked. The man in the hallway was Albus Dumbledore. He was exactly what Harry had expected, somehow, even though Harry had never seen him before in his life. Very tall, very old, with a beard that had opinions of its own and eyes that were blue in the particular way of summer skies and deep water. He was looking at Harry with an expression that was warm and careful and contained, all three things simultaneously, which was a considerable facial achievement. "Harry," Andromeda said, from somewhere off to the left. "This is Professor Dumbledore," Harry said. He didn't know how he knew. He just did. Dumbledore inclined his head. "Good morning, Harry. I apologize for the early hour." He looked at Harry with those careful, summer sky eyes, and whatever he was measuring he took a long time about it. "I understand last night was eventful." "A bit. How are you feeling?" "Fine." "Good." A pause. "Andromeda tells me your display of magic last night was quite remarkable." Harry waited. He had learned early, before words, really, the way you learn things in the body first, that when adults said things like quite remarkable with that particular tone, they were usually working their way towards something else. You just had to wait for it. "I wonder," Dumbledore said, carefully, "whether you might be willing to return to Privet Drive this morning. It's important, for reasons I can explain in full when you're a little older, that you remain with your family for the time being." "All right," Harry said. Dumbledore blinked. He seemed to have expected negotiation. "You're not curious why? You said you'd explain when I'm older." Harry picked up his jacket from the back of the armchair. "I'm not older yet. So there's not much point asking, is there?" Something shifted in Dumbledore's expression, something genuine and unguarded, just for a moment. Not quite surprise. Something adjacent to it, more respectful. "No," he said, quietly. "I suppose there isn't." Tonks had woken up at the sound of voices and was now leaning in the living room doorway with her hair the color of orange juice and the manner of someone who had opinions about Dumbledore showing up at her house at 8 in the morning. "He's 9, she said, to the headmaster of Hogwarts, without preamble. "He saved my life last night and you're sending him back to people who don't know he exists." "Dora," Andromeda said. "I'm not wrong." "No," Dumbledore agreed, and he said it without flinching, which Tonks clearly didn't expect because she stopped mid-breath. "You're not wrong. The situation is not ideal, and I'm genuinely sorry for that. But there are protections in place that rely on his presence there that I am not yet in a position to replace." He looked at Harry. "You have my word that this is temporary." Harry thought about what the word of a man he'd never met was worth. He thought about the careful way Dumbledore had said it, and the fact that he hadn't said it was fine, or it's for the best, or you'll understand later, just that he was sorry and it was temporary. That was more honesty than he usually got from adults. "All right," he said again. He said goodbye to Tonks in the hallway. She was still in yesterday's clothes, hair bright orange, looking fierce and tired and like someone who wasn't done being angry about this on his behalf. He appreciated it. Nobody had ever been angry on his behalf before. 2 years, she said. "When you get your letter. You'll be at Hogwarts." "I know. I'll be in 5th year." She made a face. "OWLs. Terrible year for you to arrive. But still." She paused, seeming to be working something out. "The thing that happened. Last night, when she gestured vaguely at the kitchen. "When you kissed my cheek. When I did that, yeah. The lights and the mug and whatever that was, I don't know what it was," Harry said. "But it wasn't bad." "No," she agreed slowly. "It wasn't bad. She looked at him with the same reassessing expression she'd had in the alley. It was just very loud, Harry offered. Loud. She seemed satisfied with that. Yeah. Very loud. Dumbledore apparat them back to the edge of Privet Drive, or rather he apparat and Harry came with him in that between space of apparition that felt like being briefly compressed, which he also handled without drama. He stood on the familiar pavement and looked at the familiar house with its familiar tidy emptiness. You have questions, Dumbledore said. Lots. In time. I know. Harry looked up at him. The early sun was still low and it caught the silver in Dumbledore's beard and the color in his robes, and he looked like something out of a painting. Can I ask one? Of course. Is what happened to me last night, the magic in the alley, is that going to keep happening? Dumbledore regarded him for a long moment. I believe, he said, that what happened last night was the beginning of something, rather than an isolated event. But what it becomes depends very much on you. A pause. You have an extraordinary amount of raw magical power, Harry. More than most wizards develop in a lifetime. The question is never whether you have enough. The question is what you choose to do with what you have. Harry nodded. That was a fair answer. He filed it away. He went up the front path. He let himself in with the key under the flower pot. The Dursleys were in the kitchen having breakfast, and Vernon looked up and said, "You're up early," without really looking at him, and that was the end of it. He went upstairs to his cupboard and sat on his cot and thought. The coal in his chest was still burning. It hadn't gone out in the night. It didn't feel like it was going to. He put his hand flat on the wall of the cupboard, and very gently, very deliberately, he pushed the smallest thread of warmth from his palm into the plaster. It was nothing, barely anything, but the plaster warmed under his touch and held the warmth and released it slowly, and the cupboard stayed a few degrees warmer than the rest of the house for the whole rest of the day. It was the first deliberate magic Harry Potter had ever done. He thought about pink hair and dark eyes and a girl who had faced down a Death Eater with a broken arm and told him to go stick his wand somewhere creative. He thought about the singing. The lights. The mug broken clean. He thought, 2 years. Then he lay down on the cot, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he slept without any bad dreams at all. The weeks after were quiet on the surface. Harry went back to the pattern of his life, school, which bored him in an absolute and structural way, and the Dursleys, who required management more than engagement, but underneath the surface things were different. He could feel it constantly now, that low warm burn in his chest, like having a pilot light that never went out. It changed things in small ways at first. His control, if you could call it that, got sharper, things stopped happening accidentally in the way they had before. If he wanted something to stay still, it stayed still. If he pushed warmth at something, the warmth went exactly where he aimed it. He borrowed books from the library. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but he read about physics and about psychology and about folklore, and in a book about European folk magic that he'd found shoved behind a more respectable volume on Celtic history, he read a paragraph that made him sit very still for a long time. In older traditions, it was understood that magical power of sufficient magnitude could recognize and respond to emotional stimuli in a way that ordinary magic did not. The concept of a soul resonance, where a magical individual's core power attunes itself to a specific person or persons, appears in records from as early as the 12th century. In such cases, the magic itself was said to act as a guardian, developing responses independent of the witch or wizard's conscious will. He read it 3 times. Then he read the next paragraph. Cases were considered extraordinary for 2 reasons, the rarity of the initial bonding event, and the practical consequences. A soul-bonded magical individual's power would demonstrate protective behaviors around the bonded party, and, in some recorded cases, demonstrate what observers described as rejection responses toward other individuals who the magic perceived as threats to the bond. He folded the corner of the page very carefully. Then he thought about the word rejection responses, and thought about Tonks, and thought about the singing. Then he thought about the mug. He went to sleep that night thinking, this is going to be very interesting at Hogwarts. He was not wrong. But that was 2 years away, and there was a lot of summer still to go. He spent it quietly, reading and thinking and practicing the smallest possible deliberate magics in the limited privacy of the cupboard under the stairs. He did not write to anyone because he didn't know anyone's address. He did not tell the Dursleys anything because there was nothing to tell them that they would have wanted to hear. He turned 10 in July without ceremony. There was a cake at school the Friday before his birthday because his teacher was kind and noticed things, and that was more than the Dursleys managed, and he found he didn't mind. What he had instead of celebration was that warm constant burn in his chest that told him, reliably and without wavering, that something had changed. Something had started. When you're 9 years old, when you're 10, you don't have the language for certainty yet. You learn it later, when you've had enough experiences to recognize it. But Harry Potter, sitting in his cupboard with a library book and the embers of something enormous and quiet burning in his ribs, knew it in his body even without the word. Something had started. And it was not going to stop. Chapter 2, Letters and Lightning. The Hogwarts letter arrived on a Tuesday. Harry knew it was coming, had known for 2 years, had spent 2 years quietly preparing for it the way you prepare for something you can't fully imagine, which is to say imperfectly and with a lot of reading, but knowing it was coming didn't make the moment any less. The owl came through the kitchen window at breakfast, landed on the table between the toast rack and Vernon's newspaper, and dropped a thick cream envelope addressed in green ink directly onto Harry's plate. Vernon saw it. Went the color of old putty. Said nothing. Harry picked up the letter, opened it, read it once through completely, and then folded it back with the calm of someone who had been waiting 11 years for permission to be exactly what he already was. "I'll need some things," he said. "Absolutely not," Vernon said, in a voice like a door being slammed. Harry looked at his uncle. Not defiantly, he wasn't performing anything. He just looked at him the way you look at a problem you've already solved in your head and are now just waiting to explain. "I'm going," he said. "There's a list of supplies. I'll need to get to London to buy them." "You are not going to some crackpot." "I'm going," Harry said again, with the same mild certainty, and something in his voice, or possibly something in the air around him, which had gone very slightly warm and still the way air goes before a close lightning strike, made Vernon stop. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Looked at his wife, who was looking at the window with the expression of someone who had decided this was no longer her kitchen. "Fine," Vernon said, which was not a word he used easily or often. He said it like it cost him something. "Fine. But don't expect us to." "I don't expect anything from you," Harry said, pleasantly, and went upstairs to pack. He was at King's Cross on September 1st with a second-hand trunk that he'd bought with Gringotts gold. The vault visit had been its own revelation, though he'd filed it away in the part of his mind where he kept things that required more information before they could be properly processed, and an owl he'd named Hedwig because she'd chosen him in the shop with a decisive and slightly imperious look that he'd respected. He found platform 9 3/4 the way he found most things, by paying attention and then doing the logical thing, which in this case was watching the red-headed family ahead of him walk through a wall and following. The Hogwarts Express was real. The scarlet engine, the steam, the noise and color and impossible reality of a train full of children going to learn magic. Harry stood on the platform and let it hit him, not swept away by it, just present for it, and then he found a compartment and sat down and waited. The red-headed boy who opened his compartment door 10 minutes later had a smudge of something on his nose and the friendly, slightly desperate air of someone who needed a place to sit. "Everywhere else is full," he said. "Can I?" "Go ahead," Harry said. The boy sat. Ron Weasley. Harry Potter. Ron's eyes went wide. Then, and this was the thing Harry liked immediately and instinctively, he collected himself with visible effort and clearly decided to treat this as normal. "Right. D'you mind if I?" He produced a paper bag of sweets from his pocket. "Help yourself," Harry said, and they got on. They were halfway through the Ron explaining the Weasley family dynamic portion of the journey, which was thorough and colorful and Harry found genuinely interesting, when the compartment door opened again and a girl with very bushy brown hair and a great deal of self-confidence walked in. "Have either of you seen a toad?" "A boy named Neville's lost one." "No toad," Ron said. "I'm Hermione Granger," she said, with the brisk efficiency of someone getting the formalities out of the way. Her eyes moved to Harry with the same recognition Ron's had, then the same self-correcting composure. She was better at the composure than Ron, which made her either more practiced or more naturally contained. Harry wasn't sure which yet. "You should change into your robes. We'll be arriving soon." "We've got time," Ron said. "Less than you think." She said it the way people say things they know to be true. Then she looked at Harry directly. "I've read about you in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts." "How was I?" Harry asked. She blinked. That had clearly not been the response she'd prepared for. "Described inaccurately in at least 2 of them," she said, recovering. "Given that you were 15 months old at the time of most of the events, I don't think the sources could have been reliable." "Probably not," Harry agreed. "She went to find Neville's toad." Ron watched the door close behind her and said, "She seems like a lot." "She seems like she's read everything," Harry said, which was not a criticism. The Sorting Hat put Harry in Gryffindor after a pause that was brief by the standards of a hat that sometimes deliberated for minutes. The Gryffindor table erupted, the Slytherin table was very quiet in the specific way of people recalculating, and Dumbledore, at the staff table, looked at Harry with those careful summer sky eyes and a small, genuine smile. Harry sat down next to Ron, who had been sorted 3 names earlier, and across from a girl called Lavender Brown who immediately asked him 6 questions at once. He answered them in order, which confused her, and then the food appeared and everything settled into the warm, noisy reality of the first feast. He was happy. Not loudly, not performed happiness, just the steady, solid version, the kind that takes up proper room. He was here. He was where he was supposed to be. The coal in his chest was warm and present and the entire castle had a feeling he couldn't name but recognized in his body, like recognition itself. The effects of the bond made themselves known on the 3rd day of term. He was in charms with Professor Flitwick, who was small and precise and clearly delighted by the subject in a way that Harry found immediately infectious. They were attempting the first-year wand movement exercises, nothing more than controlled technique, no actual spellwork yet. Harry had found within the first lesson that his wand, 11 inches, holly, phoenix feather, which had resonated in Ollivander's shop like a bell being rung from the inside, functioned as an extension of the thing in his chest rather than a separate tool. It didn't so much channel his magic as converse with it. He was practicing the wrist movement for Wingardium Leviosa when Hermione, sitting at his left with her arms straight and her textbook open to the relevant page, leaned across to correct his grip. Her hand had barely touched his wrist when something happened. It was not violent. It wasn't even loud, particularly. It was more the way a speaker sounds when you put the volume up past the point it was designed for, a pressure, a resonance, and then Hermione was 3 feet to the left of where she'd been sitting, chair and all, as if gently but firmly moved by hands that didn't exist. She sat there for a moment, completely still, in the surprised way of someone whose brain was still running about 4 seconds behind events. Harry stared at the space she'd been in. The air between them was faintly warm. "I didn't mean to do that," he said. "I know," Hermione said, carefully. She looked at the gap between her chair and his desk. She looked at Harry. Then, because she was Hermione Granger and this was how she processed things, she opened her notebook and wrote something down. Flitwick, from the front of the class, had witnessed the entire thing. He was standing very still with his wand half raised, doing the same kind of reassessment that Andromeda had done 2 years ago in her kitchen. "Miss Granger," he said, with careful brightness, "are you all right?" "Perfectly fine," Hermione said, in a tone that meant "I have questions and I am not yet ready to ask them." Ron, from Harry's right, had his hand over his mouth. His shoulders were shaking. "Not funny," Harry said. "A little funny," Ron said, voice muffled. It genuinely isn't, Hermione said, from her displaced chair. Then, because honesty was more important to her than pride, it's also a little funny. The next incident happened in the corridor outside the defense classroom, and it was less gentle. A fifth-year girl named Rowena Carlyle had apparently decided that running into Harry Potter was a social opportunity. She was not malicious, she was the opposite of malicious, bright-eyed and friendly and absolutely well-intentioned, but she'd grabbed his arm, enthusiastically, saying something about a photograph for her friend, and the magic had responded the way it responded to proximity now, loudly, decisively, and with no interest whatsoever in social nuance. The girl went backward 6 feet, landed on her feet because the force that moved her seemed to regulate the landing, and stood with her hair standing on end and a look of pure bewilderment on her face. Harry was already apologizing before she'd steadied herself. "I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, it doesn't hurt, does it?" "It doesn't mean to, what was that?" she said. "I'm still working that out," Harry said honestly. By dinner that same day, the story had made it through approximately 70% of the castle population with the viral efficiency of any story that combined celebrity, mystery, and mild physical comedy. The story, inevitably, had grown in the telling. By the third retelling, Rowena had apparently been launched over a suit of armor, which was not accurate. By the fifth it had become a duel, which was not accurate at all. By the time it reached the upper years, it had developed details Harry didn't recognize as belonging to any event he'd participated in. Ron sat across from him at dinner eating steadily through this with the expression of someone following a very entertaining play. "To be fair," he said, "the bit where she landed on her feet is factually accurate and also impressive. I didn't do the landing part on purpose. Your magic did the polite version of throwing a fifth year down a corridor. Your magic has better manners than most people." Ron considered this. "My mum would approve." Hermione, who had spent most of the afternoon in the library, arrived at the table with her notebook and 3 books she clearly hadn't owned this morning. She sat down across from Harry, at the careful distance she'd maintained since the charms incident, which wasn't offended distance, just scientific, and opened the notebook to a page dense with cross-referenced notes. "It's a recognition response," she said, without preamble. "Hello," Harry said. "Hello. It's a recognition response. Your magic is treating female contact as a potential threat to something, and it's responding with a deterrent." She turned the notebook so he could see the relevant passage, a dense paragraph that referenced 3 books he'd never heard of. "There's a documented phenomenon in older magical theory, bonded magic, or soul resonance magic. It appears in early records but it's generally considered either obsolete or mythological by modern scholarship." She paused. "Modern scholarship is frequently wrong. What triggers it?" Harry asked. "That's what I'm trying to work out." She tapped her pen against the notebook, a biro, muggle, she used both biro and quill and seemed to have no preference. "There has to be an initiating event. Something that made your magic recognize a specific bond and then respond protectively around it." She looked at him with her direct, scientist's look. "Has anything unusual happened? Before you came to Hogwarts? A magical event you can't explain, something that felt different from ordinary accidental magic?" Harry thought about an alley in Little Whinging in a rainstorm. Pink hair. A clean broken mug. Lights flickering. Singing in the bones. "Yes," he said. "What happened?" "I helped someone. They kissed my cheek." He said it flatly, because it was a fact, not an embarrassment. "Just a quick thing. But something happened when they did. Something in my magic." Hermione wrote at speed. "Who?" "Tonks. Nymphadora Tonks. She's a 5th year here." The writing stopped. Hermione looked up. "You're bonded to a 5th year?" "I think so. I haven't talked to her yet since term started. She's got OWLs. We should talk to her." "Probably," Harry agreed. Ron, who had been eating throughout this entire exchange with the attentiveness of someone watching a tennis match, pointed his fork at Harry. "So your magic just kicks witches away from you?" "Any witch?" "Apparently. But not me." "Apparently." Ron looked at this information from several angles. "I'm choosing to take that as neutral information," he said, "and not think about it too hard." He went back to his food. "Can it kick Malfoy?" "Malfoy's not a witch." "Shame," Ron said. Harry found Tonks on Thursday, in the library, surrounded by the ruins of OWL preparation, 6 books open, 3 parchments covered in different colored ink, a quill that had been bitten down to the nib, and hair that was currently the flat, colorless light gray of someone operating on 4 hours sleep. She looked up when he sat down across from her. Her eyes, brown today, matching the chewed quill's ink, went from blank to alert to genuinely delighted in about half a second, the way a candle catches. "Harry Bloody Potter," she said, in a whisper that was louder than most people's normal voices. The Madame Pants-shaped silence that descended from the direction of the shelves was immediate and weighty. Tonks dropped to an actual whisper. "I was wondering when you'd find me. Heard you launched a 5th year down the corridor." She landed on her feet. "My sources were less precise." Tonks pushed one of the open books aside to see him better. She looked exactly like she had 2 years ago, except for the gray hair and the shadows and the slight academic desperation. Same quick energy, same quality of attention that made you feel like the most interesting thing in the room. "How are you? You look, actually good. You look like you belong here." "I do belong here," Harry said, and meant it simply. "Fair point." She glanced down at his hands on the table, then back up. "The thing you're describing. The witch's thing. That's been happening since you got here." "3rd day. And you think it's because of what happened in the alley?" He paused. "I did some reading about soul resonance magic. My friend Hermione is better at the research side than I am, and she's already got 3 books I've never seen before. But the basics fit." Tonks was quiet for a moment. She drummed her fingers on the parchment, once. "I triggered it," she said. It wasn't a question and it wasn't an apology, just her thinking out loud. "The kiss. I didn't know, obviously. I was just grateful and I didn't think, I just did it, and then the lights went and I could have, you didn't know," Harry said. "Neither did I. Neither did Andromeda or Dumbledore, or if they did they kept it to themselves." He looked at her directly. "And it's not bad. I told you that then and I'm telling you now. It's just, present. Does it bother you? That witches get pushed away?" "Yes." He considered it honestly. "Not yet. It hasn't done anything that caused real harm. And I understand why it's doing it, even if I don't fully understand what it is yet." He paused. "Does it bother you?" Tonks opened her mouth, closed it. Looked at her parchment, then back at him. "I think," she said slowly, "that it would bother me if it was something you didn't want. But it sounds like your magic made a decision that has very specific logic to it, even if the logic is old and strange. And you don't seem," she gestured at him, "distressed." "I'm not." "Then no," she said, "it doesn't bother me. A beat. It's a bit weird." "Quite a lot weird," Harry agreed. "I'll write to my mum. She keeps in touch with a couple of people who know about old magic, not mainstream stuff, but she has contacts. Someone might know more than your friend's library books. Hermione will want to be involved in that conversation." "Is your friend terrifying?" "She's 11, Harry said. "But yes." Tonks grinned. The gray in her hair shifted to pale lavender, which Harry had begun to understand was her version of relaxing. "We should have a proper talk. Not the library. Pants is going to come over here and confiscate me if I keep speaking above a breath." She stacked her books with the brisk efficiency of someone who could rebuild this disaster in seconds. "Sunday. Down by the lake. Bring your terrifying friend if you want. She'll want to bring a notebook. She sounds like my mum. My mum has notebooks. Plural. She color codes them. Tonks stood up, tucking the chewed quill behind her ear. Bring her. Sunday by the lake was brisk and bright, the kind of October morning that looked warmer than it was from inside. Tonks arrived in a Weasley orange Gryffindor scarf and a hat that was definitely non-regulation, and she took one look at Hermione and her color-coded notebook and looked at Harry with an expression of pure delight. "Hello," Hermione said, shaking Tonks's hand with the decisive grip she applied to everything. She had already identified Tonks on sight from the Hogwarts student records she'd been working through, which was not information Harry had asked for but which she delivered anyway. "I have questions." "Brilliant," Tonks said. Ron, who was there because Harry had asked him, sat on the grass with his arms around his knees and the calm of someone who had learned to let other people lead the intellectual parts of conversations. He was not unintelligent, Harry had worked this out within the first week, but he allocated his energy selectively, which was a different and equally valid skill. They sat by the water and Hermione led them through her research with the systematic efficiency of someone who had been doing this since she was 7, which she had. She'd found 3 texts that referenced soul resonance magic directly, one secondary source that described it as an archaic bonding phenomenon rooted in accidental emotional synchronicity between a powerful magical individual and a chosen anchor, and one passage in a very old book called Unwritten Laws of Magical Bonding that described the protective responses in language that made Harry feel seen in an uncomfortable and accurate way. "The protective response isn't aggressive," Hermione explained. "It's calibrated. Which means it isn't random, it's responding to something specific. It seems to distinguish between contact it considers incidental and contact it considers territorial, I suppose." "My magic is territorial," Harry said. "Your magic is protective," Hermione corrected, precisely. "There's a difference. Territorial implies threat. Protective implies," she looked for the word, priority. "Whose priority?" Hermione looked at Tonks. Tonks looked at the lake. Her hair had gone the color of autumn leaves. "That's a lot," she said, "to the water." "I know," Harry said. "Sorry. Don't apologize, it's not your fault." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "So it decided. Your magic, when I kissed your cheek. It just, decided. 2 years ago," Harry confirmed. "In your mother's kitchen." Tonks was quiet for another moment. A heron lifted off the far bank of the lake, slow and deliberate, and disappeared into the trees. "I'm going to think about that," she said. "I need to think about that. It's a lot." She glanced at him sideways. "But I'm not upset. I need you to know that. I'm not upset." "I know," Harry said. He did know. He could feel it, the warmth his magic extended specifically in her direction, calm and certain. Whatever it had decided, it was comfortable with the decision. Hermione wrote steadily. Ron watched the heron's absence. The castle rose behind them in the October light, its towers lit gold on one side and grey on the other, and the lake moved slow and dark below the surface in the way that lakes do when they're very deep and not telling you about it. Classes, in those first weeks, taught Harry 2 things. The first was that he was good at this. Not gifted in the narrow sense, gifted implied surprise, a lucky draw, something you received rather than something you were. He was good at it the way water is good at being wet, fundamentally, constitutionally, without effort. Flitwick watched him do the levitation charm on the first proper attempt and said nothing at all, which was more meaningful than praise. McGonagall watched him transfigure a matchstick to a needle with a precision that left the metal gleaming and perfectly tapered and then looked at him over her spectacles with an expression that she probably thought was neutral and wasn't. The second thing was that he understood why some people found Hogwarts difficult in a way that had nothing to do with intelligence. The magical world had a texture to it, old, layered, full of traditions and assumptions and unspoken codes, and if you'd grown up in it you absorbed that texture without noticing, the way you absorb language. Hermione compensated with preparation. Ron compensated with belonging. Harry compensated by paying attention, reading constantly, and asking questions without worrying about whether they revealed ignorance. Snape was a problem. Not because Harry was afraid of him, he wasn't, and he could tell this annoyed Snape in a very specific way. Snape was accustomed to first-years who were intimidated, and Harry's calm refusal to perform fear seemed to register as a kind of affront. In their first potions lesson, when Snape had worked through the traditional ritual humiliation of asking Harry questions he hadn't been taught to answer, designed to expose ignorance, designed to establish hierarchy, Harry had answered all of them. Not because he'd been taught, but because he'd read. He'd watched something complicated move through Snape's expression during that exchange. Not respect, not yet. Something more like recalibration. Do you know why he hates you? Ron asked, on the walk back from potions that day. He doesn't hate me. He's testing me. Harry thought about it. Or he hates something he thinks I am, and I'm not being what he expects. Ron considered this. My dad says he was friends with your mum. Before. Harry filed this. He filed a lot of things, in that mental space he kept for information that needed more context before he could properly understand it. I'll ask Tonks, he said. She'll know more. Why does Tonks know everything? She doesn't. But she's been here 5 years and she pays attention and she's not afraid to ask the people who do know. He paused. That's most of it, really. They went to dinner. The great hall was bright and noisy and full of the particular quality of energy that comes from several hundred people sharing a meal, and Harry sat down and ate and listened to the conversations around him and felt the castle's old warmth in the stones and the warm particular presence of his magic in his chest, and thought, this is what belonging feels like. He hadn't known before. It was better than he'd imagined. The flying lesson happened on a Thursday, and what happened during the flying lesson was the beginning of something that would follow Harry for the rest of his Hogwarts career. Harry had never been on a broomstick. He'd also never been on a bicycle or a horse or anything that moved by a logic other than his own legs, but none of that seemed particularly relevant once the broom was in his hand, because the moment the bristles brushed his palm it was like something completed a circuit. The broom was not sentient. It didn't think or feel in any meaningful sense. But it responded to magic, and his magic spoke to it with the same directness it spoke to everything else, and when he kicked off from the ground the flight was effortless in a way that had nothing to do with beginner's luck and everything to do with the fact that it was simply right. He went up 50 feet before he remembered to think about it. The wind was cold and clean and the castle spread out below him in the October afternoon and he turned the broom with his weight rather than his grip and laughed, once, with the pure physical joy of it. Madame Hooch was watching from below with her mouth slightly open. Neville had fallen off and been taken to the hospital wing. Draco Malfoy, in the aftermath of that crisis, had grabbed the Remembrall that had rolled across the grass. Harry watched him rise on his broom with the practiced ease of someone trained from childhood, holding the small glass ball up with the entitled confidence of someone who expected the performance to be appreciated. Give it back, Harry said, from 40 feet up. Malfoy's eyebrows went up. He hadn't noticed Harry was in the air. His expression went through surprise into something more calculating. Come and get it. All right, Harry said, and went and got it. He didn't dive at Malfoy. He didn't need to. He came alongside him with the relaxed control of someone going for a Sunday flight, reached over, and took the Remembrall from Malfoy's hand with the light certainty of someone to whom taking things from other people's hands while both parties were on broomsticks 50 feet above the ground was simply the most logical available option. Malfoy's grip on his broom went tight. His face went the complicated color of someone who had just had something happen that didn't fit his framework. I just got it back, Harry said, pleasantly. He turned the broom toward the ground. You should land before Hooch comes back and sees you've still got yours out. He landed. He put the Remembrall back on the grass where Neville could find it. He stood with his hands in his pockets while Malfoy came down behind him and said something sharp and retreated to the other side of the group, and he heard Hooch returning from the direction of the castle, and he thought about nothing in particular. Hermione appeared at his elbow. She'd been on the ground the entire time, watching with her arms crossed and her notebook forgotten. "That was," she began. "Don't," Ron said, arriving on Harry's other side. "If you say extraordinary I'll lose my mind. Just say it was brilliant and move on." "It was extraordinary," Hermione said. "It was fun," Harry said, and meant it entirely. McGonagall found him after dinner. He'd known she would. Word traveled at the speed of spectacle, and what had happened on the pitch was spectacle of the most specific kind. She stood in the corridor outside the common room with the expression she wore when she was trying to contain satisfaction under professionalism, which was a slightly thinner mask than she probably knew. "I'd like you to try out for the Gryffindor Quidditch team," she said. "I know," Harry said. "Yes." Her mask slipped completely, just for a moment. She looked like someone who had prepared for a negotiation and arrived to find the other party had already signed. "You know. Wood found me at lunch and told me what a seeker is. I looked it up in the library." "Yes." He paused. "I won't let the team down." "No," McGonagall said, in a voice that had lost its professional distance and was just honest. "I don't imagine you will." October thickened into November, and the castle changed with the season the way old buildings do. The torches in the corridors became the primary light source, the stones held cold rather than releasing it, the lake went from deep green to something closer to pewter. Harry played his first Quidditch match in grey November light against Slytherin and caught the snitch 11 minutes in, which was fast enough to make the commentator, Lee Jordan, 3rd year, enthusiastic, go briefly speechless. Oliver Wood stood in the middle of the changing room afterward and made a speech that became immediately legendary among the team for its length, emotional content, and statistical specificity, and Harry sat on the bench and listened and felt the warm constant certainty of the thing in his chest and thought about what Dumbledore had said on the pavement in front of Privet Drive 2 years ago. "The question is never whether you have enough." He thought he understood that better now. Tonks found him at dinner that night and sat down across from him, in flagrant disregard of the invisible circle that cleared around Harry whenever an unfamiliar witch came too close. She was different, and the magic knew it, and the warmth it directed at her had none of the charged quality it took on around other people. It was just warmth. Easy, constant, specific. 11 minutes, she said, reaching for the nearest bowl of potatoes. 11. "The snitch came right at me," Harry said. "Right at you," Tonks repeated, "because you were going right at it." She served herself, hair cycling through 3 shades of satisfied bronze. "My 3rd-year self would be absolutely furious at how good you are." She paused. "My current self is still a bit furious but in a better way." "What way?" "The proud way," she said simply, and went back to eating, and Harry found he had nothing to say to that, so he went back to eating too. Hermione appeared later in the evening in the common room, where Harry and Ron were playing chess, Ron winning, as he always did, with the easy brutality of someone born knowing chess. She opened her notebook to a page he'd seen her working on since October. "I wrote to Andromeda Tonks," she said. "You did? You mentioned she had contacts." "I introduced myself by letter and asked if she had any information relevant to our research." She wrote back. Hermione's voice had the quality it got when she'd found something significant, a kind of controlled excitement. "She says there are 2 aspects to this that she'd been thinking about since the night she met you. One is the bond itself, which she calls a fidelitas bond. She says it's not actually as rare as modern scholarship assumes, but most cases go unrecognized because the bonded witch or wizard doesn't have your level of raw power, so the protective response is too subtle to notice." "And the second?" Harry asked. Hermione looked at her notes. Then at him. "She says the bond will strengthen as you get older. The protective responses now are relatively gentle because you're 11 and the magic is young." A pause. "She says by the time you're 14 or 15, it will be considerably less gentle." Harry took this in. Across the board, Ron's knight removed his bishop with the cheerful indifference of someone else's chess piece following its own goals. She also says, Hermione continued, carefully, that the bond isn't one-directional. It's not just your magic protecting Tonks. She thinks, and she was careful to say this is her interpretation, not documented theory, that your magic is also drawing on Tonks as an anchor. As a source of stability. Harry was quiet. Which means, Hermione added, that Tonks matters to the functioning of your magic in a structural way. Not just symbolically. Ron moved his knight again. Check, he said, absently. Then, also absently, is that why you're so, together? For someone who grew up how you grew up, you're very, he waved his hand at Harry in a gesture that was trying to describe something like steady, centered, grounded. I don't know, Harry said. Maybe. He thought about the 2 years on Privet Drive with the pilot light burning in his chest. The warmth that had never gone out. The dreams he hadn't had. Hermione closed her notebook. We should keep researching, she said. But I think we should also tell Tonks all of this. She should know what Andromeda said. She already knows more than we do, Harry said. But yes. Tell her. He looked at the chessboard. Ron's queen was about 3 moves from taking everything he had left. He moved his king sideways, which was not a winning move but bought time, and thought about the word anchor. He thought about pink hair in the rain and the clean broken mug and the singing. He thought about 11-minute Quidditch matches and flights that felt like breathing and the warm old stones of the castle around him. He thought, I'm exactly where I need to be. Outside, the first snow of the season was beginning to fall, soft and silent on the castle towers, covering the Quidditch pitch and the lake and the long sloping grounds in something that looked, in the dark, like the whole world had been made new. Chapter 3, What the Mirror Doesn't Show. The chamber opened in October. Harry knew something was wrong before anyone else did, and he knew it the way he knew most things, not through information, but through the thing in his chest. It had a quality during the first weeks of second year that was different from the warm constant burn he'd grown used to. Harder, somehow. More alert. Like the pilot light had turned up without his permission and was listening for something he couldn't hear. He noticed it first during breakfast on a Tuesday morning in mid-October when the post arrived and a second-year Hufflepuff girl at the other table screamed. Not in the dramatic way of someone startled, in the short, cut-off way of someone whose voice stopped working before the scream did. She'd found her bacon floating an inch off her plate, levitated by nothing, and when she batted it down it stayed down, but the girl herself sat very still for the rest of the morning with the expression of someone recalibrating their understanding of the world. That was the first one. Over the next 2 weeks there were 3 more incidents. A Ravenclaw second year found his telescope twisted into a shape that defied both metallurgy and geometry. A first-year girl came into her dormitory to find every soft surface, pillows, mattresses, folded clothes, arranged in a perfect spiral pattern on the floor, geometric and precise and somehow worse than if they'd been thrown around chaotically. A cat was found near the dungeons, rigid and wide-eyed and alive but not responding, propped against the stone wall like a very realistic carving of itself. Mrs. Norris. Filch's cat. Harry was not there when they found her, but he heard about it within 10 minutes through the particular acoustic system of Hogwarts gossip. He was in the corridor on his way back from the Halloween feast with Ron and Hermione when the commotion started, and he stood at the back of the crowd that gathered and listened to Dumbledore's careful, measured explanation, petrified, not dead, mandrake restorative, and watched Snape's eyes sweep the crowd and land on him with an expression of professionally controlled suspicion. Filch pointed at Harry. He did it. He did it. He was with us, Ron said immediately, with the flat certainty of someone stating a physical law. Hermione opened her mouth to confirm it and then closed it again as the invisible circle around Harry quietly suggested she maintain her current distance, which she had gotten very good at navigating. Be that as it may, Snape began. It may be more than that, Dumbledore said, with the mild authority of someone who didn't need to raise his voice because he'd never needed to. Harry. Are you all right? I'm fine, Harry said. He was watching the cat. The thing in his chest was doing something he could feel but not describe, a kind of orientation, like a compass needle settling. What did it to her? We're investigating, Dumbledore said. I know, Harry said. But what did it to her? Because it's not a jinx and it's not an accident and it's not a student with a bad attitude. The pattern of this is specific. He was aware of how that sentence sounded coming from a 12-year-old. He was also aware that it was true and that being 12 didn't change the truth of it. Something planned this. Dumbledore looked at him with those summer sky eyes for a long, quiet moment. Yes, he said, carefully. Something did. The crowd was watching Harry now instead of the cat. Harry looked back at them without self-consciousness and then looked at Ron and Hermione and said, "Let's go back," and they went. He told Tonks at breakfast the next morning. She'd heard already, she heard everything, through the distributed intelligence network of a 6th year with good social infrastructure, but she listened to his version with her full attention, the quality she had of making the person she was talking to feel like the conversation was the only thing happening. The voice, Harry said. That's the thing I keep coming back to. Tonks's fork paused halfway to her mouth. What voice? Harry told her. He'd heard it twice now, a voice in the walls, cold and sibilant and deeply inhuman, speaking in a language he understood but that he couldn't reproduce in English. He knew, in the part of him that processed facts without drama, that hearing voices other people couldn't hear was not a sign of mental health. He also knew, in the part of him that processed magical reality directly, that this voice was real and that it was moving and that it was not a hallucination. Tonks set her fork down. You understand it? Yes. And it's coming from the walls. Moving through them. Going deeper, toward the dungeons, or under the dungeons. He kept his voice conversational. Across the table, Ron was listening with the particular stillness he got when something had his full attention. I followed it last night as far as the 2nd floor, and then it went somewhere I couldn't follow. Through the floor or through a wall that isn't supposed to be a door. Harry, Tonks said, in the tone of someone who was about to say something important, the language you're describing, cold, smooth, not quite human, does it sound like this? She wrote something on a napkin. Not words, she drew a symbol, something sinuous and compact. He looked at it. The thing in his chest stirred. What is that? It's a Parseltongue notation. Old one, not used anymore. You're describing the sound of Parseltongue. The great hall was its usual morning noise and brightness and Harry sat very still for a moment in the middle of all that and thought about what she'd just said. I can speak to snakes. Apparently. And understand them, which is actually the rarer part. She tapped the napkin. It's hereditary, usually. Comes through bloodlines. The last known Parselmouth in living memory is, she stopped. Her eyes did something. Is Voldemort, Harry said. Yes. Ron made a sound that was not quite a word. We share a scar, Harry said, without particular emotion. He touched it briefly, the familiar lightning bolt. We share, whatever happened that night. It's possible he left more than a scar. He thought about this, systematically, the way he'd learned to think about uncomfortable things, directly and practically, without letting the emotional weight of it slow the processing. Does that mean the chamber story is real? Hermione had it all from the library 2 days ago, Ron said. She's been very contained about it, which is actually more worrying than if she was talking constantly. Hermione, when consulted before first period, had indeed had it all from the library and was being contained about it in the way of someone who had a hypothesis she was still stress testing before committing to it. She was in the library now as often as she wasn't somewhere else. Harry had noticed the dark circles. Come find me tonight, Tonks said, standing and shouldering her bag. I have a Hogsmeade permission form I'm not using. And I have an idea. She paused. Also, the Parseltongue. Don't advertise it. Not because you should be ashamed of it, it's just, information, Harry said. I know. That too, she said. But mostly, I don't want people being afraid of you. They'll waste time being afraid of the wrong thing. The something Tonks had was an idea about the Moaning Myrtle situation. Moaning Myrtle occupied a bathroom on the second floor, haunting it with the enthusiastic misery of someone who had been dead for 50 years and felt very strongly that everyone should know about it. She was also, as far as anyone had worked out, the last known witness to whatever had happened the last time the chamber was opened, which was a significant and underutilized resource. Harry went to the bathroom at 7:30 with Ron, who came everywhere, and found Myrtle mid-wail about a first year who'd said something about her glasses. He waited for the wail to wind down with the patience of someone who had learned early that the fastest way through emotional turbulence was through it, not around it, and then said, "I need to ask you about the night you died." Myrtle stopped. She looked at him with the startled, suspicious expression of a ghost who was more accustomed to being ignored or fled from than directly addressed. "Why?" "Because someone was in this bathroom when it happened, and I think you know who." He sat down on the edge of one of the sinks, which made him eye level with her floating form and made the conversation feel more equal. "And because whatever opened then is open again and something's going to get badly hurt if we don't find it first." Myrtle looked at him for a long time. She had the translucent, slightly luminous quality of water in shallow light, and her expression was cycling through things that 50 years of habitual misery had built walls around. Then she said, "There were eyes." "What kind of eyes?" "Yellow. On the floor." She pointed at the drain. "I came out to see what the noise was and there were eyes, and then I died." She said it very flatly. "And then I stayed here because I was angry. And because Olive Hornby deserved to feel bad." Harry looked at the drain. Then at the sinks. "The sound," he said, and then he spoke in the language he couldn't describe, the one that moved like water over stones, that felt in his throat like something ancestral and involuntary, and said, essentially, "Open." The sink moved. Not all of it, the pipe section, specifically, rotating on an axis that had no mechanical reason to exist, revealing behind it a pipe entrance wide enough for a person, dark and cold and pointing down into the earth at an angle that suggested significant depth. Ron looked at the entrance. "Of course," he said. "We need to tell someone," Harry said. He hadn't moved from the sink edge. He was thinking about the voice in the walls and the cold angle of the pipe and the yellow eyes that Myrtle had described and what he knew, from Hermione's exhaustive library research, about what kind of creature lived in deep dark places underground and had yellow eyes and killed with a look. "Dumbledore," Ron said. "Yes." Harry looked at the pipe for another moment. Then he got off the sink and went to find Dumbledore. He did not find Dumbledore. He found McGonagall, in a corridor, with an expression so tightly controlled it was its own kind of information, coming from the direction of the hospital wing. "Miss Granger is in the hospital wing," she said. Harry stopped walking. The thing in his chest lurched sideways, not pain, but something with the same urgency as pain, a violent redirection of attention. "What happened?" "She's been petrified." McGonagall said it with the steadiness of someone who had said too many difficult things today and had used up the available emotion. "She was found near the library." She had, a pause, a piece of paper in her hand. "We've taken it to examine." "I need to see her," Harry said. "She's petrified, Harry." "She won't, I know she won't know I'm there." He said it quietly and absolutely. "But I need to see her." McGonagall looked at him for a moment, then stood aside. The hospital wing was quiet. Hermione was in the third bed, lying perfectly still, her eyes open in the fixed, slightly unfocused way of the petrified, alive, breathing, but somewhere behind glass. Her bushy hair was still arranged from whatever she'd been doing before it happened. Her hands were on top of the covers, and there was ink on her right forefinger from the pen she'd been using. Harry stood beside the bed and looked at her for a long moment. The lurch in his chest had settled into something harder and more specific. Something that resolved into purpose. He leaned forward and said, quietly, to the closed-off, absent Hermione, "I'm going to sort this out." "The paper you were holding." Whatever you found, it's going to be useful, and I'm going to use it, and when Pomfrey fixes you're going to be absolutely insufferable about being right. He paused. I'm counting on it. He went back to McGonagall, who was waiting in the corridor with her arms folded and her jaw set. The paper, he said. She looked at him. He looked back, steady and direct, not performing patience but genuinely patient. She reached into her robe pocket and produced a folded page, ripped from a library book, a page of dense descriptive text with a hand-drawn diagram. He took it. Read it. Recognized, in Hermione's handwriting in the margin, just 3 words, written quickly, like she'd written them while running, pipes. Direct eye. Roosters. He looked up. A basilisk. McGonagall's composure thinned at the edges. We believe so. She figured it out, Harry said, and he couldn't keep the pride out of his voice entirely. She worked it out. That's why she's not dead. She didn't look directly. She was using something reflective. She saw it reflected. Harry, and the voice I've been hearing. It's the basilisk. Moving through the pipes. He was thinking fast, fitting the pieces in order. It's being controlled. Directed by someone. The chamber is open and someone opened it and is pointing a 1,000-year-old basilisk at students. He looked at McGonagall with complete, unadorned directness. We need to close the chamber. And we need the roosters. Professor Dumbledore is not here, Harry said. He said it without frustration. Just the fact, as it stood. Who's senior? McGonagall stared at him. She had been teaching for 30 years. She had taught Voldemort. She had taught James Potter, who had also been 12 once, though considerably less contained about it. She looked at this 12-year-old with his broken and taped glasses and his constant, unnerving steadiness and said, slowly, the professors are managing the consequences, Harry said. I can find the source. He met her eyes. I found the entrance. I can speak to it. I can lead it somewhere the roosters can reach it. A pause. That's not arrogance. That's just what I can do that other people here can't. She was quiet for 10 seconds. Then, you are not going alone. No, Harry agreed. I'm not. He went with Ron, and he went with Tonks, who was 16 and had been in Dumbledore's army before it existed and had already cast 4 spells Harry didn't know the names of by the time they reached the bathroom on the 2nd floor. I need to point out, Ron said, in the bathroom, looking at the pipe entrance, that I have no particular death wish. Noted, Harry said. Just wanted that on record. In case, you know. Record-keeping purposes. Your objection is noted and appreciated, Tonks said, with the serenity of someone who had made a decision and was committed to it. Her hair had gone flat, battle gray again, the color Harry had learned meant she was focused rather than frightened. She looked at the pipe. How deep does it go? Don't know, Harry said. Right. She cast a cushioning charm on the inside of the pipe with the casual precision of someone who had done practical charms under pressure. I'll go first. You won't, Harry said. She turned to look at him. He didn't elaborate. The magic in his chest had the quality it got around her, warm, specific, absolutely non-negotiable on this particular point. He didn't frame it as protectiveness because he didn't need to. He just went first. The slide down was long and dark and ended in a soft charm-assisted landing on stone that was cold and damp and smelled of age. The tunnel stretched ahead, stone-flagged, lower than was comfortable, with the particular quality of air that had been underground for a very long time and was not apologetic about it. Ron landed beside him. Tonks a second after, already upright, already scanning. Right, she said. Nice. They walked. Harry followed the thing in his chest, which had a direction now, specific, magnetic, pointing ahead and slightly down. The basilisk was somewhere ahead. He could feel it the way you feel a change in air pressure before weather, in the body before the brain. They had roosters. They had 3 of them in a sack that Tonks had acquired from Hagrid with an explanation that was deliberately incomplete but fully convincing, because Hagrid was generous with animals to people who were clearly going to treat them right. The roosters were objecting to the sack in the language of roosters everywhere, which was loud and extremely specific about its discontent. If a rooster's crow kills a basilisk, Ron said, in the echoing tunnel, why don't they just, always have roosters? Everywhere. As a precaution. Roosters were being killed, Harry said. Before this started. Someone went around killing the roosters in the area. To remove the precaution. Smart, Tonks said. Horrible, but smart. They came through a stone door that Harry opened the same way he'd opened the sink, in the ancestral language that felt borrowed, something that lived in the scar rather than in his chest, and into a chamber that deserved the capital letter. Long, stone-pillared, lit by some sourceless greenish light, with the serpentine motifs of Slytherin running over every surface. At the far end, the great stone face of Salazar Slytherin himself, set into the wall, his carved mouth slightly open and the opening slightly too large. The basilisk came out of it like 40 feet of wrong. It was enormous. It was the dark, dusty green of deep water, and its scales had the dry sound of paper, and its eyes, Harry didn't look at its eyes. He looked at its direction of movement and at the stone floor and at the pillar to his right, which was the largest available cover, and he said, in the fluid borrowed language, "Stop. Wait." The basilisk stopped. It regarded him from somewhere above and to the right where he was not looking. It was curious, in the way very large predators can afford to be curious, with the unhurried assessment of something that had very few natural concerns. He said, "You're being used. Someone is directing you and using you as a weapon. You know this." A pause. The basilisk's response was not in words, it was in images, in feelings translated into the rough shape of language. Something like, "The voice commands." "The voice is not here now," Harry said. "I am here. And I am asking you to go back." Another pause. Longer. Or, Harry continued, in a language that was not quite a threat because the speaker didn't need threats, "We do this the way of the roosters." He looked at Ron. Ron opened the sack. The roosters had opinions. They voiced them. The basilisk thrashed, not in pain, not immediately, but in the deep, ancient, biological revulsion of a creature whose mortal vulnerability had been triggered. It pulled back. It moved in the direction of the carved face, faster than something that large should move, with the fluid wrong speed of a creature that was entirely muscle. Harry said, in the borrowed language, "Go back. Go deep. Do not come out again for the voice that controls you. Its time is ending." He didn't know if that was true yet. He intended to make it true. The basilisk went back through the carved mouth and the stone closed and the sound of it echoed around the chamber, and then there was silence, and the roosters, deprived of their target, returned to opining loudly about the sack. Ron sat down on the stone floor. "Right," he said. "All right. You did it," Tonks said. She was behind Harry and to his left, where she positioned herself when the basilisk came out, and he'd felt her magic active and ready the whole time, a warmth in the air that was distinct from his own. "You actually talked it down." "Temporarily," Harry said. He was looking at the stone face. "Someone's controlling it. Someone opened the chamber and set it moving. The attacks are directed, specific targets, and none of them have died, which means whoever is behind this either has poor aim or is being deliberately non-lethal." He thought about this. Non-lethal. They want to terrorize, not kill. They want the school closed. Why? Ron asked, from the floor. Because they want Dumbledore gone. Harry turned this over. A school full of petrified students is a crisis that removes Dumbledore from the picture. Someone benefits from that. He looked at Tonks. Someone who's been waiting for an opportunity. Tonks's face was doing something complicated. Lucius Malfoy was pushing for Dumbledore's removal at the Board of Governors before term started. My mum heard about it through ministry channels. Malfoy, Harry said. Not a question. But he can't be controlling the basilisk himself. He needs a proxy, something with Slytherin's bloodline, something that can open the chamber. A diary, Tonks said slowly. There were rumors, after the First War, Voldemort was known to create objects that held pieces of his power. Not widely known. Aura division stuff. She looked at Harry. If someone planted one of those, on a student, Harry said. Someone who could open the chamber without knowing they were doing it. He thought about the attacks. The pattern. The specific targets. We need to tell Dumbledore. All of it. Right now. He's been recalled, Ron said. Board of Governors. Malfoy pushed through a suspension. Then we tell him anyway, Harry said. He needs to know and we know it and that's what comes next. He looked at them both. Let's go. He walked toward the stone door, and Ron scrambled up from the floor, and Tonks fell in at his side, and the roosters complained loudly about the whole situation in the sack, and they went back up through the tunnel the way they'd come, methodically and without drama, because that was the kind of people they were. Dumbledore returned on a Thursday. Harry had sent him a letter through Fawkes, a gamble based on the assumption that Dumbledore's Phoenix could find Dumbledore wherever he was, which turned out to be correct. That was 7 sentences long and contained the following information: location of the chamber entrance, nature of the creature within, identification of the controlling mechanism as a probable Horcrux or similar object, and a strongly worded suggestion that Lucius Malfoy's involvement required immediate investigation. He signed it Harry Potter, 2nd year, Gryffindor, because he was 12 and occasionally he thought that was funny. Dumbledore came back Thursday morning and by Friday afternoon Ginny Weasley had been found, white and shaking, in the chamber by Dumbledore himself, without Harry's assistance, because Harry had given him everything he needed and Dumbledore was more than capable of managing the rest. The diary, small, black, 50 years old, belonging to someone named T.M. Riddle, had been recovered. The Board of Governors had received a very thorough visit from an Auror team investigating Lucius Malfoy's recent activities. The Mandrake Restorative was administered on a Tuesday night. Wednesday morning, Hermione came down to breakfast. She arrived in the Great Hall like a person returning from a long journey, slightly unfocused, slightly louder than usual, already looking for her notebook, which Ron had kept safe in the dormitory because he'd known she'd want it. She sat down across from Harry and he pushed the toast toward her and she picked it up and ate it without looking at it because she was already looking at him. The basilisk, she said. Talk down, Harry said. Roosters for backup. Talk down, she repeated, in the voice of someone confirming information they'd read and are now verifying in person. You talked down a basilisk. Briefly. Dumbledore handled the permanent solution. After you gave him a 7-sentence letter containing the complete solution. I left out some details. Harry. She set down the toast. Her expression was a compound thing, gratitude and something adjacent to exasperation and underneath that, something she didn't have easy words for. I was petrified. I know. And you, she stopped. Looked at her hands. Looked back at him. Ron said you came to the hospital wing. He shouldn't have told you that. He absolutely should have. She was quiet for a moment. When she looked up her eyes were bright in a way that she clearly found inconvenient. Thank you. The research you did, Harry said. The page from the library book. That's how we knew about the roosters. You worked it out. He held her gaze. I should be thanking you. Hermione pressed her lips together in the precise way of someone managing their face very firmly. We should both be thanking each other, she said, with the formal finality of someone closing a ledger, and went back to the toast. Ron arrived 5 minutes later and the look on his face when he saw Hermione was so unguarded and genuine that Harry looked away to give him a moment with it. Tonks found him that afternoon, down by the lake in the thin May sunshine. She came and sat beside him on the grass without preamble and for a while neither of them said anything. A breeze came off the water and the giant squid did something slow and tentacled near the surface in a way that seemed meditative. "It's a Horcrux," she said, eventually. "The diary. Mom confirmed it this morning through her contact at the Unspeakables. Dark magic of the worst kind, a piece of a person's soul, separated and stored." She watched the squid. "Voldemort made one. Maybe more than one. Which means, he can't die properly while they exist," Harry said. "Yes." He thought about this for a while. The water moved. The sun moved. The squid completed whatever it had been doing and submerged again in a slow, considered way. "There are more," Harry said. "Not a question." "Almost certainly. Then we'll need to find them." He said it the same way he'd said "I'm going to Vernon Dursley." "Factually. Already decided." "Not now. We're 12. He felt Tonks look at him sideways. "But eventually. Before he's strong enough to come back properly." "He will come back," she said. "Won't he?" "I think so. The magic I've got, the scar, the Parseltongue. None of that's an accident. Whatever he tried to do to me when I was a baby, it didn't finish. It's going to try to finish." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm not going to pretend I'm not thinking about it." "No," Tonks said. "Neither am I." She turned to face him properly, folding her legs underneath her on the grass. Her hair was soft bronze in the afternoon light. "Harry. The bond. The way your magic works. I've been thinking about what my mum said, the anchor thing. And I think," she paused, choosing words. "I think it's not just that I'm useful to your magic. I think your magic chose correctly." He looked at her. "I would have chosen this," she said, simply. "If anyone had asked me. I would have chosen to be the person your magic runs toward." She held his gaze. "I just wanted you to know that. That it wasn't only something that happened to us. That I'm," another pause. Then, quietly, "I'm here on purpose." Harry thought about the singing in the kitchen 2 years ago. The clean break of a mug. The lights. He thought about a girl with a broken arm who hadn't given up an inch. "I know," he said. She reached over and knocked her shoulder against his, the easy physicality of someone who had physical ease as a natural language. The magic went warm and absolutely still, the way fires go still in the absence of wind. No flicker. Just burn. "We're going to fix this," she said. "The Horcruxes, Voldemort, all of it. Not today. But eventually." "Yes," Harry agreed. "And I'm going to be there." "I know," he said again. The lake settled. The light moved. Down on the grounds, somewhere beyond the tree line, a bird was singing with the straightforward joy of a creature that had exactly one job and loved it. Hermione came to find them an hour later, notebook in hand, with a look that meant she had been thinking all afternoon about something specific and had now arrived at a conclusion she wanted to share. "Horcruxes," she said, sitting down on Harry's other side with the comfort of someone who knew the invisible circle's rules and worked within them without resentment. "I've been thinking about Horcruxes." "Of course you have," Tonks said, with deep affection. "The diary was one. Dumbledore will know there are likely more. He's clearly been thinking about this for longer than we have, given the way he reacted to the information in Harry's letter." She opened the notebook. "But there's something else. The sorting of objects that might be Horcruxes, the nature of each one's destruction. This is going to be a long project. Years, possibly. And it's going to require," she looked at her notes, then at Harry, "someone with your specific abilities. The Parseltongue. The magic you have." A pause. "I think Dumbledore knows this. I think he's known for a while what role you're supposed to play in this." "I think so too," Harry said. "I think he's been trying to manage the information flow. Give you what he thinks you can handle." "He's not always right about what I can handle," Harry said. No, Hermione said. He's not. She looked at her notebook. I've been thinking about how to change that. Research, Harry said. Research, she confirmed, with the satisfaction of someone for whom research is both weapon and comfort. If we know what's coming, we can prepare. If we prepare, we're not dependent on being told. She looked up. The dependency is the dangerous part. Tonks pointed at her. I like her. I know, Harry said. She thinks like an Auror. She thinks like herself, Harry said. Which is better? Hermione's mouth pressed tight in the way it did when she was managing something she found unexpectedly pleasant. Right, she said. So. Horcruxes. I found 3 texts that might reference objects Voldemort valued. I want to cross-reference them with historical records of his known activities, now. Ron's voice came from 20 feet away. He'd been approaching for the last minute, apparently, and had arrived at the relevant word. He dropped onto the grass beside Hermione with the philosophical resignation of someone who had learned that planning ahead was not his primary skill and leaning on the people who did it well was the most efficient alternative. Yes, now, Hermione said. It's May. We've had a year. Can we have one afternoon? We can plan and have an afternoon, Hermione said. They're not mutually exclusive. Ron looked at Harry. Harry looked back with the expression of someone who had no intention of mediating this. Ron looked at Tonks. Tonks shrugged with the eloquence of someone who had already picked a side. Ron lay back on the grass and looked at the sky. Fine, he said. But if I fall asleep it's not rude. It's recovery. They planned and had an afternoon, both at once. The sun moved west and the lake went gold with it and the castle's shadow stretched long and slow across the grounds and the 4 of them sat in the May warmth and talked about the future the way young people talk about futures they're not quite old enough to carry but are carrying anyway, with a mixture of clarity and fear and the particular quiet courage of people who have chosen to know rather than not know. The bond between Harry and Tonks hummed steady and warm in the background of all of it. Not performing. Not demanding. Just present, the way the castle was present, the way the lake was present, old and certain and not going anywhere. Later, walking back up to the castle as the light finally gave out, Tonks fell back a step so she was beside him rather than ahead. She didn't say anything. Just walked beside him the way you walk beside someone you don't need to explain yourself to. The castle's lights were coming on in the windows, one by one, amber in the dusk. Somewhere in the dungeons, sealed in cold stone, a basilisk coiled in the dark and did not move. And in the hidden spaces of the castle, in objects that would take years to find, in a graveyard that none of them had seen yet, in a body that was not yet a body, something waited. Patient. Rebuilding. Harry could feel it. He'd been able to feel it, in some way, since the night in the alley in the rain. The way you feel a weather system on the horizon, not arrived yet, but coming. Real and coming and not going to be stopped by hoping. He didn't hope. He prepared. It was, he thought, the more useful option. Chapter 4, The Wolf and the Map. Remus Lupin arrived at Hogwarts on a Tuesday in September, smelling of old books and something herbal and moving with the particular careful energy of a man who had learned to take up exactly as much space as required and no more. He was thin in the way that implied a long argument with the body rather than natural constitution, with graying hair that had gone gray too early and the kind of tired that sits in the eyes rather than the face. Harry watched him walk to the staff table at the start of term feast and thought, that one knows something. He wasn't sure how he knew. Just that Lupin's eyes, doing their quiet sweep of the great hall, paused on Harry for precisely half a second longer than everyone else's did, not the celebrity pause, not the famous scar calculation, something else. Something that looked at him and saw a shape it recognized. He filed it. First defense class was Thursday morning, third period, and Lupin arrived with a large wardrobe on a trolley and a case of butterbeer he described as for afterward, which generated enough goodwill to relax the entire room before he'd written a single thing on the board. The boggart was exactly what the textbook said it was, which Harry had read over the summer along with everything else he could find about third-year defense content. It was also more interesting than the textbook's description prepared you for, because there is a significant gap between understanding that a boggart takes the shape of your deepest fear and watching a wardrobe vibrate with the physical reality of that principle. Lupin walked the class through the theory with the ease of someone who had been doing this in some form for a long time. Teaching was a habit for him, Harry could tell, something he did with the automatic competence of a deeply acquired skill. He had the quality of a good teacher that is difficult to define but immediately recognizable. He made the students feel like they were discovering things rather than being told things. When it came to Harry's turn, Lupin moved to stand between him and the wardrobe with the same casual certainty Harry had noted in the man's every movement, not overbearing, not dramatic. Just present. Positioned. "I think," Lupin said, to the class but also specifically to Harry, "we'll skip Mr. Potter for today. The boggart in an open setting may find itself spoiled for choice." He said it lightly, and it got a laugh, and most people took it as a gentle joke about Harry's famous background. Harry looked at Lupin directly. Lupin looked back, and the half-second passed again, and they understood each other. Harry stepped aside. Neville took his place and the wardrobe shook and the class proceeded and the lesson ended with butterbeer and the particular good energy of a group of people who had done something mildly frightening together and all survived. At the end of class, Harry was the last one to leave. He wasn't trying to be, he'd been putting his things away at normal speed, but Lupin had been cleaning up, and somehow they ended up alone. "Spoiled for choice," Harry said. Lupin smiled. It was a genuine smile, but not a comfortable one, the kind that comes from being found out in a kindness. "I meant it as consideration, not pity." "I know." Harry shouldered his bag. "You were friends with my father." Lupin's hands went still on the stack of parchment he was straightening. "Yes." "And my mother." "Yes." "Good friends." "Close." Harry wasn't asking. He'd put this together the way he'd put most things together, from fragments, from the texture of how people said certain names, from the way Tonks had answered a question about his parents with a pause that meant "there's more here than I'm sure how to say." "You knew them well enough to know me when you looked at me." Not the scar and celebrity. Something else. Lupin turned to face him. He had the expression of a man who had prepared for many versions of this conversation and found that none of them quite fit. "Your eyes," he said. "Lily's eyes. But the way you carry yourself is," he paused. "James," Harry said. "The best of James." Said quietly, with the particular precision of someone choosing between versions of a true thing. "Your father was complicated. Exceptional and flawed in equal measure, the way gifted people often are. You seem to have the gifts without the—" He looked for the word. "Arrogance?" Harry offered. Lupin's mouth curved. "I was going to say performance of the gifts. But yes. I had an interesting childhood," Harry said, without self-pity. "Not a lot of room for performing." Lupin looked at him. Looked at him properly, the way Andromeda had looked at him in her kitchen when he was 9, the way McGonagall had looked at him on the Quidditch pitch, with the careful recalibrating attention of an adult finding something that didn't match their expectations. "You should know," Lupin said, "that I'm not going to treat you like your father's son. Or like James Potter's legacy. Or like," a slight hesitation that might have meant the boy who lived but chose not to say it. "You're Harry. That's sufficient on its own." Harry looked at him for a moment. Then he said, "Thank you," and meant it in the specific way you mean things that fill a space you didn't know was empty until they did. He left. Lupin stood in the empty classroom and looked at the door for a long time. The Hogsmeade visit was the last Saturday in September, and the village was everything Ron had been describing since first year, warm and busy and impossible in the way magical things are impossible, which is to say entirely matter-of-factly and without apology. Harry and Ron got to the Three Broomsticks first, found a table, and were halfway through butterbeer when the door opened and Tonks came in out of the October wind looking like a gust of weather given human form, hair flattening and then springing back, scarf trailing. She'd graduated in June and was in aura training now, 6 weeks in, which she described in letters as wonderful and absolutely exhausting, and I've been hexed by accident 4 times, but I'm not complaining. She spotted Harry immediately, and the warmth in his chest went immediate and specific, the way it always did when she came into a room he was already in, not triggered, just present. Like recognition. She dropped into the seat across from him with the particular sprawl of someone who'd been upright and professional since dawn and was now done with that. Aura training is going to kill me, she announced. But you're not complaining, Harry said. Not complaining. Merely stating a medical fact. She stole a drink of his butterbeer with the ease of someone who had decided that reciprocal theft of beverages was an acceptable friendship practice, which it was. How's 3rd year? Lupin's good. Her face went immediately complicated, fond and careful in a way he'd noticed before when Lupin's name came up. He is good, she said. He's also, she glanced at Ron, who was pretending to examine the drinks menu with the studied casualness of someone who had been doing a lot of that lately around conversations that touched on adult information. He's complicated. In a way that's not his fault. I know what he is, Harry said. Tonks looked at him. How? The herbs he carries. Wolfsbane. The timing of his absences, I cross-referenced the lunar calendar. The way he moves, that careful thing, like he's managing something. He paused. The boggart that he wouldn't let near me. He was worried it might take a form that gave information. He said all of this without drama, as information. I don't care. He's the best defense teacher we've had. Tonks released a breath that suggested she'd been holding it for something. He'd be, yeah. He'd want you to know. He just doesn't know how to say it. I'll tell him I know, Harry said. It'll be easier for him. Tonks looked at him across the table with the expression that she got sometimes, the one that was neither exactly sisterly nor exactly something else, the one she'd been wearing more frequently as the months had added up between them. The one that she clearly had thoughts about and had chosen not to yet speak aloud. You're 13, she said. I know. Just, noting it. Noted, Harry said, easily, and Ron set down his menu and said, can we talk about the fact that someone sent Harry a firebolt anonymously? Because I've been thinking about it and I have a theory. The theory was that it was Sirius Black. The theory was, as theories went, not comfortable. Sirius Black had been the dominant fact of the wizarding world's collective anxiety since he'd escaped from Azkaban in August, escaped impossibly, through something that the Dementors couldn't explain and the Ministry couldn't categorize, which was in itself more frightening than anything specific he'd done. The wanted posters had been everywhere since September. The Dementors had been stationed at Hogwarts's entrances since September. Harry had passed through their perimeter on the train back to school and discovered that Dementors, for him, were not merely unpleasant but specifically, personally catastrophic, pulling up sounds he couldn't quite hear but felt in the way you feel the sound of breaking glass, his mother's voice, a door, a burst of green light. Lupin had been on the train. He'd done something with silver light from a wand and spoken to the Dementor and the thing had withdrawn, and then he'd given Harry chocolate and said nothing explanatory until Harry had asked directly. The firebolt had arrived with no note. Harry was using it because it was the finest racing broom ever made, and turning it down because of an anonymous sender would have been a different kind of fear, and he didn't have that kind. He'd had Hermione look it over for hexes, she'd found nothing, and had written to Andromeda, who had also found nothing, and Tonks had put it past 2 aura trainers who had also found nothing. Whatever Sirius Black had sent him, it was clean. The last person to have a firebolt level budget and a reason to send it to me specifically, Ron said, working through his logic with the focused energy he brought to chess, is my godfather, who also went to school with your parents and who is apparently also very good at finding people even from prison, because Hermione's cat's been eating my rat and the rat's been avoiding him, and, he stopped. Looked at his pocket. Where is Scabbers? You've lost your rat again, Harry said. I haven't lost him, I just don't currently know where he, Ron felt through his pockets more urgently. Tonks had gone very still. Harry noticed. What? Your rat, she said to Ron, slowly. How long have you had it? Since, he was Bill's before me. So, 12 years? Give or take. 12 years, Tonks repeated, in the tone of someone arriving at a sum they didn't want the answer to. A rat that's 12 years old. He's mangy. Old animals get mangy. Ron, Harry said, watching Tonks's face. Tonks. What is it? Tonks was already pulling out her wand, quietly, under the table. A Death Eater was reported missing after the First War. Never caught, never found, never confirmed dead. Peter Pettigrew. There was a finger, people assumed the worst. She looked at Ron. Peter Pettigrew was a registered animagus. His animal form was a rat. The three broomsticks continued its warm noisy business around them, entirely unconcerned with the silence that had just fallen at their table. Ron looked at his empty pocket. He looked at Tonks. He looked at Harry. My rat, he said, is a, Pettigrew has been in my pocket for 12 years? Possibly, Harry said. His magic was doing something sharply focused now, directed. Where would he go? If he's Pettigrew, if he knows he's been made, he'd go to Sirius, Tonks said. He'd run straight to Black, warn him, or, she stopped. Or away from Sirius. If Black is here for Pettigrew and not for you, Sirius isn't the secret keeper, Harry said. Tonks looked at him. He wasn't the traitor, Harry said, working through it fast. It was Pettigrew. Sirius was protecting Pettigrew, or was supposed to be. He was supposed to be the secret keeper, but they switched at the last moment and only Pettigrew knew where my parents were. He could feel the shape of it now, the logic fitting together with the cold clarity of something that has been true for a long time and is only now being seen. Sirius has been in Azkaban for 12 years for something Pettigrew did. Tonks was already moving. I need to contact my supervisor. Now. If Pettigrew is, he's at Hogwarts, Harry said. He's been at Hogwarts all year. He knows Sirius is here. He'll go to him directly or he'll run. He stood. We need to find Lupin. Why Lupin? Because Lupin and Sirius were friends. Because Lupin knew Pettigrew. Because Lupin has been watching for Black all year in a way that isn't fear, it's something more complicated. He was already moving toward the door. Ron was right behind him, slightly pale, processing at speed. Tonks came last, sending a Patronus, a large, bounding hare, shooting out through the window toward what Harry assumed was her supervisor's location. They went out into the October wind. They found Lupin in his classroom, which was where he always was on Hogsmeade Saturdays, grading with the focused attention of someone for whom work was also company. He looked up when they came in and saw Harry's face and was immediately, completely present. Scabbers, Harry said. Ron's rat. We think he's Pettigrew. Lupin stood up so fast his chair moved. Where is he now? Gone. He bolted. Harry watched Lupin's face. You knew. You've suspected. Since the start of term, Lupin said, in a voice that had very tight control applied to it. I recognized the magical signature on the Marauder's map, the what? Ron said. I'll explain later. I recognized a signature that should have been dead. His jaw was tight. I was trying to work out how to, he stopped. It doesn't matter. What matters is where he goes. To Sirius, Harry said. Or away from Sirius. Either way Sirius will know by tonight. He looked at Lupin directly. He's innocent. Lupin closed his eyes for 1 second. 1. Then he opened them. Yes. He's been in Azkaban for 12 years for something Pettigrew did. Yes. The word came out like something that had been held under pressure for a long time. Right, Harry said. So we need to find Pettigrew first. Before he either warns Sirius and drives him off, or gets to Sirius and, I don't know what Sirius would do to him, but I imagine it would be final. Sirius would, Lupin started, then stopped. Sirius was not patient when we were young. 12 years in Azkaban does not improve patience. He was already picking up his wand. The map is upstairs. Come. The Marauder's map was extraordinary. Harry held it in his hands and looked at the moving dots and the labeled corridors and thought, my father made this. He turned the thought over. He thought about Lupin's description, Prongs, Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and thought about 4 boys who had done something genuinely remarkable and grown into men with very different trajectories, and thought about the ways in which people you've never met can still shape you. Wormtail's dot was moving on the map. Already at the edge of the grounds, moving fast toward the Whomping Willow. He's going underground, Lupin said, watching the map over Harry's shoulder. There's a tunnel under the willow. It comes out at the Shrieking Shack. Which is where Sirius is, Harry said. Likely. Then that's where we go. He didn't wait for discussion. He had the map and Lupin had the knowledge and Ron had a rat-shaped grudge and Tonks had both the authorization and the practical aura training. They went through the school and down the grounds in the fading October afternoon and the Whomping Willow tried to object and Lupin did something with a long branch that froze it, and they went in. The tunnel was narrow and earthen and smelled of the same deep underground cold as the chamber, and they went through it fast, following the map and the dot that was Wormtail and the theory of where Sirius was. They came out in the Shrieking Shack. Sirius Black was there. He looked, wrong, for the person on the wanted posters. The posters had a creature in them, hollow-eyed and barely present, a man reduced to his worst moment and left there to develop. This man was thin, extremely thin, the thinness of deprivation, 12 years of it, but there was something behind his eyes that the Azkaban photography hadn't captured and couldn't. A quality. Lupin saw it immediately and made a sound Harry had never heard from him, low and involuntary, and crossed the room and Sirius caught him and they held each other the way people hold each other when the relief is too large for other forms. Harry stood in the doorway and watched and felt something move in his chest that wasn't his magic. You, Sirius said, over Lupin's shoulder. He was looking at Harry. His voice was rough from years of disuse and his eyes were dark and intense and wet at the corners and the quality in them, looking at Harry, was something Harry had no word for except recognition in the largest possible sense. You look like, I know, Harry said. You found me, Sirius said. You sent the broom, Harry said. Sirius managed something like a laugh, which came out damaged but genuine. Guilty. It's a good broom. Best one I could find. He was still looking at Harry the way people look at things they'd stopped believing in. You're all right. They told me you were all right but I'm all right, Harry said. Tonks appeared behind Harry in the tunnel mouth and took one look at the scene and then looked at Scabbers, who had been cornered by Ron in the far corner and was being held with the firm grip of someone who had processed a significant betrayal and arrived at the other side of it. She crossed to Ron, cast a spell Harry didn't recognize, and Scabbers went through a transformation that was deeply, fundamentally wrong-looking and deposited a short, rodent-faced man on the dusty floor of the Shrieking Shack. Peter Pettigrew looked at Sirius. At Lupin. At Harry. He started to cry, which did not appear to move anyone present. Don't, Sirius said. His voice had gone very quiet. He had a wand now, Harry wasn't sure when it had appeared. Don't do that. Don't you dare. Sirius, Lupin said. Not here. The Ministry put me in Azkaban. The Ministry will fix it. With him, Lupin gestured at Pettigrew, alive and caught and talking, the Ministry has everything they need. He looked at Sirius steadily. 12 years, Padfoot. Don't throw away what comes next over what came before. Sirius's wand arm trembled. Once. Then he lowered it. Tonks already had ropes around Pettigrew, Auragrade, the kind that tightened when you moved. She bound him with the efficient competence of someone 2 months into training but doing it correctly. I'm a trainee Auror, she said, to Pettigrew's streaming face, and even I know you're going to Azkaban. So you might as well stop the performance. Pettigrew stopped the performance. The ministry was difficult, and then less difficult, and then, over the next 3 weeks, with the accumulated force of Dumbledore's testimony, Lupin's detailed account, Tonks's Aura Division report, and the physical evidence of a very much alive Peter Pettigrew, it became the kind of ministry case that moved with the deliberate, reluctant speed of bureaucracy confronting its own significant error. Sirius was cleared on a Wednesday. Harry heard about it through Tonks, who sent a letter with 2 sentences, "He's out. Go see him." He went. Sirius was staying temporarily at the Hogwarts Infirmary, a strange and provisional arrangement that Dumbledore had made, because Sirius had nowhere else to be yet and the castle was the safest available location. He was better fed by now, 10 days of regular meals having done visible work on the gauntness, and he was sitting in a chair by the window in jeans and a borrowed jumper looking almost like the photographs Harry had found in the Lupin-loaned album, the young, laughing man with his best friend's arms around his shoulders. Almost. There was something in the eyes that 12 years leaves and doesn't entirely leave. Harry sat in the other chair and didn't start with small talk, which Sirius appeared to appreciate. "Dumbledore said you wrote the letter," Sirius said. "The one about the chamber last year. Hermione did most of the research. But you went in." "Yes. And talked a basilisk into a timeout." "Roughly." Sirius looked at him. "James would have tried to ride it." "That would also have been a choice," Harry said. Sirius laughed, properly this time, full and genuine, something that had clearly been stored under pressure. He would have said exactly that. He'd have said, "I considered writing it and I want credit for the restraint." The laugh faded slowly, leaving something fond and sad in the aftermath. "He'd have been so," he stopped. "Proud?" Harry offered. "Both of them," Sirius said. "Your mum especially. She'd have had opinions about Dumbledore not telling you things. She had opinions about everything and she was right most of the time, which Dumbledore would have found both useful and annoying." He looked at Harry. "He's not telling you things, is he? About why you're a target? About what Voldemort? He's telling me what he thinks I should know," Harry said. "Which is less than I should know. You're 13. I know what I am. Not defensive. Just true." Sirius studied him. "What do you want to know?" "The prophecy," Harry said. "There is one." Hermione found a reference in the restricted section, something about a power the Dark Lord knows not. "I think it's about me." Sirius was quiet. "I'm not asking you to tell me what it says," Harry said. "I think Dumbledore knows and I think he'll tell me when he decides the time is right. I'm just confirming that it exists." "It exists," Sirius said. "All right." Harry sat back. "Then I'm going to keep preparing, and when Dumbledore thinks I'm ready to hear it I'll hear it, and in the meantime I'll work on being ready." He paused. "And when Voldemort comes back, if he comes, when," Harry said. "He's not gone. He's been not gone since I was a baby. He'll come back properly eventually." He looked at Sirius without flinching. "When he does, I'll be ready." Sirius looked at him for a very long time. There were things in his expression that moved through and didn't settle, grief and admiration and something protective and something that was trying to decide whether this 13-year-old needed to be talked out of what he was saying or whether talking him out of it would be missing the point entirely. "Right," Sirius said, quietly. "Also," Harry said, "Dumbledore mentioned once that I could come to you as a guardian." "Formally." Sirius's whole face changed. "If you want that," Harry said. "If I want," Sirius started. Then he stopped. Then he said, with the precise and careful diction of someone managing something very large very deliberately, "There is nothing in the world I want more." "Then I'll talk to Dumbledore about the paperwork," Harry said, with the matter-of-fact efficiency of someone booking an appointment. Sirius looked at the window. Outside, the grounds were golden in the late October afternoon, and a figure was crossing the grass far below, small and pink-haired, which meant Tonks was visiting before heading back to London for her evening training session. "She's good for you," Sirius said. "She's my anchor," Harry said. "Simply. Just the fact. Your magic's, yes. She know that?" "Yes. And she's here on purpose," Harry said. "Her words." Sirius looked at him sideways with something complicated in his expression. "You're 13, he said. "Everyone keeps saying that," Harry said. "Because it's true and also because what I'm looking at doesn't look 13. He paused. "Which is a compliment and also a concern simultaneously." "I know." Harry stood. "Get better. The Quidditch season starts in November and I want you in the stands." "I'll be there," Sirius said. "Wild dragons couldn't keep me, don't promise wild dragons," Harry said. "I've met a basilisk. Nothing's hypothetical anymore." He went downstairs, and out onto the grounds, and the pink-haired figure had seen him from 20 meters away and changed direction toward him, and the warm constant certainty of the thing in his chest was doing what it always did when she came toward him, settling, specific, absolutely sure of itself. They walked back up to the castle in the last of the October light, and Tonks talked about aura training, the practical hex deflection course, the legilimency awareness sessions, the stealth module where she kept accidentally metamorphing mid-sneak because concentration was complicated when you were trying to do two things at once. And Harry listened and sometimes responded and sometimes just walked beside her because sometimes walking beside someone was the primary communication. "The bond," Tonks said, halfway up the slope. "Just that, putting the word out there." "What about it?" "My trainer, Shacklebolt. He noticed something. During a detection exercise, he ran a standard magical resonance scan on all the trainees and mine came back with, he said it was like having a second signature. Not mine. Anchored to mine." She watched the path ahead. "He asked if I'd done some sort of bonding ritual." "What did you say?" "I said no ritual. I said it was a long story." She paused. "He knows about your magic generally, everyone at the ministry knows something's unusual about your power levels. He put it together himself." "What did he say?" "He said," she stopped walking. Harry stopped too. She was looking at the castle rather than at him, at the towers going amber in the fading light. "He said Fidelitas bonds are extremely old and extremely rare and that the witches involved in them historically have a higher than average, they're more powerful. Their own magic is augmented by proximity to the bonded individual." She turned to look at him. "I've been noticing it. In training. The spells I'm doing at the end of the day, when I'm tired, they're not weakening the way they should. My output doesn't drop. Shacklebolt says I'm the top of the training cohort." Harry thought about this. "The bond goes both ways," he said. "Hermione's mum said that. She said it wasn't one-directional." "I know. She was quiet for a moment, in the way she was quiet when she was being careful rather than when she had nothing to say. I want to be sure that what I am to you is because I am that thing. Not because magic decided it and built it and I followed the magic." She met his eyes. "Does that make sense?" "Yes," Harry said. "And yes. Yes and yes. Yes, it makes sense. And yes, you are that thing because of you." He kept her gaze, easy, direct. The magic didn't create something. It recognized something that was already there. He paused. "I was 9. I'd met you for an hour. You'd broken your arm and told a Death Eater where to put his wand and you didn't give up 1 inch even when you should have." He paused again. "The magic just noticed first." Tonks looked at him for a moment with the expression that had no clean name yet, not the one she let people see casually, the performance of Tonks' energy, the loud bright deliberately clumsy version she wore when she was in a room of people she wasn't certain of. The other one. The one he only saw when they were alone. "You're still 13, she said. "I'm aware. I'm 17. "I know. So the things she stopped. A color moved through her hair, red to amber to something richer, and settled. The things I notice. I'm filing them. Under what heading? Under when the time is appropriate, she said, with the precision of someone who had thought about this carefully. Which is not now. But is a real folder. All right, Harry said. They walked the rest of the way up to the castle in the comfortable silence of two people who have said something important obliquely and don't need to say it directly yet. Lupin found Harry in the defense classroom after the last lesson before Christmas, cleaning up after a practical exercise that had left scorch marks on 3 desks and a large quantity of purple slime on the ceiling. You're staying for Christmas, Lupin said. Not a question. He knew, he'd checked, Harry suspected. Sirius isn't well enough to travel yet, Harry said. I'll be here. I'm staying too. Lupin vanished the ceiling slime with practiced ease. Purely personal choice. Nothing to do with keeping an eye on you. Of course, Harry said. I wanted to. Lupin paused in the way he paused when he was being precise about something. I know you know. About my condition. Since September, Harry confirmed. I wasn't sure when to bring it up. That's somewhat typical of you. Lupin sat on the edge of his desk. Most people either ask immediately or avoid it entirely. Most things don't need immediate addressing, Harry said. Some things you just need to know and carry and wait for the right moment. Lupin looked at him. Who taught you that? No one, particularly. He thought about it. The Desleys, maybe. Accidentally. You learn to read timing when timing matters for your own safety. He said it without bitterness because bitterness required a kind of sustained engagement with the wrong that had been done to him, and he'd found that engagement more exhausting than simply noting the fact and its consequences. Lupin was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry, he said. About your upbringing. About the years we weren't there. Were you a we? Those of us who could have advocated harder for an alternative arrangement. He said it with the specific, directed guilt of someone who had held this particular shape of regret for a long time. We were broken up by grief and accusation and fear. We weren't thinking clearly. We should have been. You couldn't have known what it was like, Harry said. No, Lupin agreed. But we should have checked. Harry thought about Privet Drive. About the cupboard. About 12 years of being managed out of existence by people who found his existence inconvenient. He thought about what that had built in him, the quiet, the attention, the self-sufficiency, the ability to sit with uncomfortable things without needing them resolved. He thought about the pilot light in his chest that had never gone out. It wasn't all bad, he said, which was not mercy, it was accuracy. Lupin seemed to understand the distinction. No, he said. You turned out, he stopped. What? Something that isn't in the books, Lupin said. About you. About who you are. He paused. I had a theory, before I knew you, about James Potter's son. What he might be like. What shape the power might take. He looked at Harry with the scholar's quality that lived under the teacher. You're not that. You're something I don't have a reference text for. Which is, another pause, both wonderful and occasionally frightening. Frightening how? Because the world is going to want to use you, Lupin said, quietly and directly. Voldemort is going to want to destroy you. Dumbledore is going to want to guide you. The Ministry is going to want to claim you. People will come at you from every direction and each of them will have a version of you in their head that they want you to be. He held Harry's eyes. The frightening thing is what it takes to remain yourself through all of that. Harry thought about this. What does it take? I don't know, Lupin said honestly. But I think, the thing you have. The bond. The anchor. He paused. I think that helps. Harry thought about Amber Bronn's hair in a folder marked when the time is appropriate and someone who was there on purpose. Yes, he said. It does. Christmas at Hogwarts was exactly what the castle deserved at Christmas, lit and warm and generous with itself, the great hall transformed and the corridors strung with something that smelled like pine and old magic. Harry spent it with Sirius, who was well enough by December to move to the Hogwarts guest quarters and who spent Christmas morning engaged in the most detailed Quidditch argument Harry had ever participated in, and with Lupin, who made proper tea and had strong opinions about chess that turned out to be equally matched by Ron's, which generated a rivalry that would last considerably longer than the holiday. Hermione had gone home but had left books. Multiple. With notes. Harry read them. Tonks sent him a gift, a small notebook, serious and dark-covered, with a note that said, "For the things that are too useful to keep only in your head. Also I got you a puking pastille from Weasley's Wizard Wheezes because it seemed like the right energy. Don't eat it. Show it to Malfoy." He wrote back, "The notebook is perfect. The pastille is a diplomatic asset. Thank you for both." He started the notebook that night, sitting by the common room fire, the castle quiet around him. He wrote, "What I know, the Horcruxes. The prophecy exists. Pettigrew is caught. Sirius is free. Lupin stays. Voldemort is rebuilding. What I don't know yet, how many Horcruxes. What the prophecy says. What the fourth tournament task is going to be. What Dumbledore isn't telling me. What I intend, to be ready. For all of it." He closed the notebook. Outside the windows, snow was falling again, the second winter of his time at Hogwarts, the third winter of the pilot light burning, and he could feel the castle around him the way you feel something that has decided to know you, stone and history and the accumulated magic of 1,000 years of people who had sat exactly here, in this firelight, in this dark, making exactly this decision. The decision to be ready. He held it. Let it settle. It settled. Chapter 5, The Goblet's Jaw. The Goblet of Fire spat his name out on a Tuesday night and the great hall went so quiet that Harry could hear the parchment burning at the edges as it fell. He stood up before anyone told him to. Not because he was following instruction, Dumbledore hadn't spoken yet, hadn't called his name, hadn't done anything except hold the burning scrap of parchment between two fingers with an expression of absolute stillness. Harry stood because sitting felt like waiting to be told what to do, and he was past that. He walked to the front of the hall through a silence that had texture, thick with the specific quality of several hundred people's shock, the Beauxbatons and Durmstrang delegations watching with varying degrees of confusion and suspicion, the Hogwarts students watching with the divided attention of people who weren't sure yet which version of this story they were in. The Gryffindors behind him were completely silent, which was unusual for Gryffindors, which meant they were either proud or frightened or both. He passed Dumbledore, who was watching him with those careful eyes, and went through the door to the side chamber where the three chosen champions were already waiting. Cedric Diggory, tall and startled, turned to look at him. Fleur Delacour, magnificent and precise, turned to look at him. Victor Krum, compact and watchful, looked at him in the way of someone filing information. Something went wrong with the goblet, Harry said, to the room rather than to anyone specifically. "You are Ze fourth," Fleur said. Her English was clear and slightly musical. "How is this possible?" "Someone put my name in," Harry said. "I didn't." "You are 14, Krum said. "I know. The age restriction, someone bypassed it," Harry said. "Someone who knows enough about goblet magic to fool it into producing a fourth name, and who wanted that fourth name to be mine." He looked at the three champions steadily. "Which means someone wanted me in this tournament for a specific reason. And it isn't because they think I'll win." Before anyone could respond the door opened and Dumbledore came through, followed by Crouch, Bagman, Maxime, Karkaroff, and McGonagall. The room was suddenly crowded with adult authority. "Harry," Dumbledore said. "Did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire?" "No," Harry said. "Did you ask an older student to?" "No," Harry said. He said it the same way he'd said "I'm going at 9 years old and I don't expect anything at 11. Flat, plain, and not open to negotiation." "I didn't." And I think the more important question is who did and why, because whoever put my name in there did it with something specific in mind, and I'd like to know what that is before I walk into a task designed by my enemy." The room was quiet. Dumbledore looked at him. The look lasted 2 full seconds, which in Dumbledore time was a considerable duration. "You are bound by the contract," he said. "The goblet creates a magical obligation. You will have to compete." "I know," Harry said. "I'm not trying to get out of it. I'm saying the person who put me in is planning something and we should find out what." Moody, who had been standing in the back corner and who Harry had registered the moment he came through the door, not liking, exactly, but registering, with the specific attention he gave things that felt not quite right, made a sound that was either approval or a throat clearing. It was difficult to tell, with Moody. "The boy's right," Moody said. "Someone went to a lot of trouble. That's the important question." Crouch looked deeply uncomfortable in the way of a man whose bureaucratic system had been used against itself. Bagman looked like a man watching a horse race go off script. Karkaroff was looking at Harry the way Harry looked at things he was working out, which was interesting, and filed. "We'll investigate," Dumbledore said. In the meantime, he looked at Harry with the careful, specifically personal weight he brought to certain sentences. "Be cautious." "I know," Harry said. He went back out into the Great Hall, which erupted the moment he appeared in the doorway, and sat down next to Ron, who was looking at him with an expression that was trying to be excited and was winning against itself slowly towards something more serious. "You're in it," Ron said. "Apparently," Harry said. "You didn't." "I didn't. Someone else did." Ron thought about this with the chess player's focused logic. "Someone who wanted you in. For what?" "That's the question," Harry said, and picked up his fork, and ate dinner, because being in a magically binding potentially lethal tournament was not sufficient reason to miss dinner. Tonks arrived the next morning. She didn't announce she was coming, she was there at breakfast, appearing through the doors of the Great Hall with the directed energy of someone who had received a piece of information the previous evening and had immediately started moving. She was in Auror training clothes rather than anything casual, which meant she'd come straight from somewhere. She sat down across from Harry and put both hands flat on the table and looked at him. "Before you say anything," Harry said, "I didn't enter." "I know you didn't enter," she said. "Someone entered you and I need to know what Dumbledore is doing about it." "He's investigating." He used that exact word. "Shacklebolt used a different word," she said. "He used furious. He's looking at it from the Ministry side. Someone used old goblet magic to manufacture a 4th contract, that's premeditated, complex, and aimed at you specifically." Her magic was up, Harry could feel it, the warmth that was specifically hers running at a higher level than normal, the way a fire goes when someone throws more fuel. "This isn't random. This is another move." "I know," Harry said. "Whoever is planning Voldemort's return is moving the pieces." The people within earshot went quiet at the name. Harry noticed and didn't moderate it. He'd decided 2 years ago that the name was just a name and that refusing to say it was a small surrender he wasn't willing to make. "The tasks will be designed to put you at maximum risk," Tonks said. "The graveyard theory, the what?" "Something Shacklebolt said." Obliquely. "He thinks," she lowered her voice fractionally, not out of fear but out of professional habit, "that the end point of whatever this is involves a ritual. Something that needs you physically present somewhere specific. The tournament is the mechanism to get you there without raising immediate alarms." Harry thought about this. It was cold and clear and had the ring of accurate. "Voldemort needs something from me," he said. "Or from my blood. Something specific to who I am." "Your blood," Tonks said. "Yes. That's Shacklebolt's theory." He sat with that for a moment. The warmth in his chest was steady and present and very specific. He thought about the scar and the parcel tongue and the thing in the corridor at the Ministry that he'd never quite seen but that he could feel sometimes at the edge of awareness, like a door with a draft under it. "All right," he said. Then I compete and I watch for the mechanism and I'm ready when it happens. You can't just, I can, Harry said, gently. I've been building toward this for 4 years. This is what it was for. He met her eyes. I'm not going in blind. I have you and Hermione and Sirius and Lupin, and I have 4 years of preparation, and I have whatever is in here. He didn't gesture, but she knew what he meant, she always knew, which is considerable. A pause. I'm not afraid. Tonks looked at him for a long moment. She'd changed in the year since graduation in ways that training did to people, a sharper quality to how she carried herself, the reflexes of someone who'd been practically tested regularly, a kind of readiness that lived just under the surface. Her hair was a deep steady burgundy this morning, which he'd learned was her serious color. No, she said. I know you're not. The burgundy shifted briefly through something warmer and then back. That doesn't stop me worrying. I know, he said. I don't want you to stop. She looked at him. It means you're paying attention, he said. I want you paying attention. Something moved through her face, quickly, not fully surfacing, but there, the way things are there in people who are filing them under when the time is appropriate. She picked up a piece of toast from the rack and ate it without looking at him, which was a form of composure that he recognized. I'm going to talk to Shacklebolt, she said. And then I'm going to come back and talk to Hermione. Between her research and his intelligence contacts we should be able to work out at least the general shape of what's planned. Good, Harry said. She left. The warmth in his chest followed her to the doors and held for a moment after she'd gone, the way sound holds in a good room after music stops. Ron, from his left, said, She's worried. Yes, Harry said. She doesn't worry like that for just anyone. No, Harry said. Ron nodded, with the careful neutrality of someone who had a view and had decided to hold it until asked. He picked up his pumpkin juice. What's the first task? Dragons, Harry said, because Hermione had found out 3 days ago and told him immediately and he had been preparing since. Ron choked on the pumpkin juice. The first task was dragons. Harry knew this and went in with a plan, and the plan worked, and the way it worked was not subtle and not quiet and not designed for the comfort of anyone watching who preferred their extraordinary things packaged modestly. He summoned his firebolt, summoned it, wandlessly, across the entire length of the castle and its grounds while standing in the champion's enclosure, because he could, because 4 years of deliberate practice had made the kind of magic that would have landed Andromeda Tonks on the kitchen floor in 1989 into something as ordinary and directed as a telephone call. The firebolt came. He flew. The horntail was enormous and territorial and genuinely dangerous, and Harry was faster than it, faster than its fire, faster than its instincts, because the broomstick and his magic and the flying were the same conversation, and the conversation happened too fast for a dragon to follow. He took the egg in 93 seconds. The crowd's noise was something that existed in another layer of reality while he was in the air. He heard it when he landed, came back to it. Fleur was watching him when he landed. She had the expression of someone who had revised their assessment of a situation significantly upward and was still completing the revision. Crumb was watching him too, with the particular attention of one exceptional natural athlete watching another, recognizing the quality without needing to perform about it. Cedric walked over and held out his hand. That was the most reckless thing I've ever seen, he said. In the best possible way. Harry shook his hand. Your approach was cleaner, he said honestly. Better patience. Cedric looked slightly surprised, the way people do when they expect competitive ego and find technical honesty instead. Different styles, he said. Yes, Harry said. Better that we're not all the same. The judges' scores were the highest they'd given, and Bagman was practically beside himself, and Harry went to find his friends. The weeks between the first and second tasks were, in the way of important intervals, not as quiet as they appeared. Hermione and Tonks had indeed compared notes, and what they'd produced was a theory document that Hermione had presented to Harry in the library with the characteristic thorough quiet of someone delivering a significant intelligence brief. Tonks had added Shacklebolt's intelligence contributions in the margins and handwriting that went uphill when she was excited, which it did considerably throughout. The theory: Voldemort needed Harry's blood for a specific ritual. The tournament was the mechanism for getting Harry to a location where the ritual could be performed. The agent, the person who had put his name in the goblet, was inside Hogwarts. Possibly disguised. Harry had read the theory and thought about Moody. Not about anything specific yet. Just about the quality of Moody that felt off in the specific way that things feel off when they're very carefully constructed to feel normal. Real Moody, by reputation, was erratic in the way of someone who was genuinely battle-damaged. The Moody at Hogwarts was erratic in the way of someone performing erratic. The difference was texture. He didn't say anything yet. He filed it. The second task was the lake, and the hostages were people taken overnight, and when Harry found out in the small hours of the morning before the task, Hermione's frantic research, the gillyweed solution found at the last possible moment through Neville Longbottom's herbology expertise and a very long night, he went into the water and found all 4 hostages and brought all of them to the surface because the alternative required leaving people to drown on a technicality and he had no interest in that technicality. The judges argued about scoring a rule-technically broken heroism versus a rule-following pragmatism, and Dumbledore settled it with the serene authority of someone who had already decided and was patient enough to let the discussion finish first. Harry ended the task in second place overall. He didn't care about the standings. He cared about the thing he'd heard at the bottom of the lake, which was not a mermaid singing but something underneath the singing, a residual vibration in the deep water that felt like surveillance. Like something watching from below the watching. Like eyes that weren't the merpeople's eyes. He told Tonks that night. She told Shacklebolt. Shacklebolt told the Auror Division. The Auror Division, in its institutional way, filed the report and assigned it a category and moved on to more immediate concerns, which was a failure that would cost something in the end. Between the second task and the third, Harry had a conversation with Dumbledore. He requested it. Sent a note through the standard channels, professor's office, evening appointment, with the efficient brevity he'd learned was the most effective approach with Dumbledore, who appreciated directness when it was genuine. Dumbledore received him with tea and the expression of a man who had been expecting this and was reasonably prepared for it. The prophecy, Harry said. Dumbledore set down his cup. Harry. I know it exists. I've known since third year. Sirius confirmed it. Harry held his gaze. I'm not asking because I'm scared of it. I'm asking because going into whatever this tournament ends in without knowing what someone with access to it knows about me is, strategically bad. You're 14, Dumbledore said. You said that to me in different words when I was 9, Harry said, and it was true then and it's true now and it's also not the point. He kept his voice even. The prophecy shapes the choices being made about me. By Voldemort, by his agents, possibly by you. I have the right to know what's shaping those choices. Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. You have been thinking about this for a while, he said. Since third year, Harry said. I've been waiting for the right time to ask. And this is the right time. Someone is trying to get me somewhere specific using the tournament as a delivery mechanism, Harry said. That suggests they have a use for me that they believe the prophecy supports. Which means knowing the prophecy would tell me something about their plan. He paused. Also, I deserve to know. That's not strategic, it's just true. Dumbledore looked at him for a very long time. The fire crackled. Fawkes stirred on his perch and made a low, warm sound that sat under the silence like a foundation. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, Dumbledore said, quietly. Born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies. And the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not. And either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. The fire crackled. Harry sat with it. Let it settle. Looked at it from several angles the way you look at something structural, how it bears weight, where it stresses, what it means for what comes after. Either must die at the hand of the other, he said. Yes. He's not properly alive right now, Harry said. He's something. Not fully formed. The Horcruxes are keeping him in a state between. Which means until they're destroyed, the prophecy's endpoint isn't reachable. He was thinking aloud, working through it. He needs to be mortal. He needs all the Horcruxes gone. Then the prophecy's condition can be met. Dumbledore was looking at him with an expression that Harry had seen before, on Andromeda, on McGonagall, on Lupin, the specifically recalibrating look. Yes, he said. That is, substantially correct. How many Horcruxes? We believe 7 was his intention. We have identified the diary, destroyed. There are likely 6 remaining. Harry nodded. We should work on that. In time, I know, Harry said. Not tonight. But soon. He stood. Thank you for telling me. Thank you, Dumbledore said, which was not something he said to 14-year-olds with any frequency, for asking. Harry went back to the dormitory. He lay on his bed and looked at the ceiling and thought about either must die at the hand of the other, and the coal in his chest burned steady and low and certain, and he thought, all right. Then I need to make sure it's his hand that goes down first. He picked up the dark-covered notebook and wrote 3 words, find the Horcruxes. Then he put it under his pillow and slept. The maze arrived in June. Harry went into it in the clean sharp dusk of a clear summer evening, Hogwarts behind him, the stands full of noise, and the thing in his chest running hot and specific and directed. He had his wand and his magic and 4 years of everything he built, and he had the awareness that whatever waited at the center of the maze was not the Triwizard Cup, and nothing about tonight would be straightforward. Cedric came with him to the cup at the end. That was not planned, it was the result of a complicated sequence of events inside the maze that included a Scroot, an Imperius cursed crumb, and a moment where Cedric had his wand blasted out of his hand by something they couldn't identify. Harry had fought it off and given Cedric his wand back, and they'd run the last section side by side, and Harry had thought, we should both take it. Portkey, he'd reasoned. Portkey goes somewhere. 2 is better than 1. He told Cedric that. Cedric had looked at him sideways while they ran and said, you think it's a trap. I think if it weren't a trap I would feel better, Harry said. But we're taking it anyway. I'm taking it, Harry said. You don't have to. Cedric took it. The graveyard appeared between one breath and the next, old stones, dark sky, a manor house on the hill with one light burning in an upper window. The Portkey deposited them in the dirt at the base of a large carved headstone, and before either of them could move a voice said kill the spare, and Harry moved without thinking, shield up and moving Cedric sideways, and the killing curse hit the headstone and the stone exploded, and Cedric was behind Harry with his wand raised and his face gone white. Move, Harry said, already scanning. A figure in the dark. Small, carried, wrapped, a thing that was both pathetic and deeply wrong, radiating the same cold Harry had felt since childhood, the door with the draft under it. Pettigrew. And in Pettigrew's arms something that Harry had felt before and recognized now with the bone-deep recognition of a scar that shared its origin. Harry Potter, said the thing in Pettigrew's arms, in the voice of something that wanted to be a voice and wasn't quite. I know who you are, Harry said. Then you know why you're here. The ritual, Harry said. Bone of the father, flesh of the servant, blood of the enemy. You need my blood to get a body. He kept his wand on Pettigrew, who was moving toward the stone cauldron at the center of the graveyard. You've been planning this since before the tournament started. You are perceptive, the thing said, and there was something that might have been approval in it, which was genuinely unpleasant. For a child. I'm not going to just let you have it, Harry said. You will not have a choice, it said, and Pettigrew moved with a speed that Harry hadn't fully accounted for, a binding curse that wrapped his wand arm against his body and slammed him back against the headstone. And here was the difference between Harry Potter and the version of this night where everything went wrong. His wand arm was bound. His wand was in his hand but immobile. His other arm was free. And his magic had never needed a wand. He pushed outward, not a spell, not a named thing, the same raw channeled intent that had leveled a Death Eater in an alley when he was 9, and the binding shredded. Not dramatically, not with performance. It just went, the way bindings go when the thing they're binding is considerably more than they were designed for. Pettigrew stared. "Wormtail," Harry said. He put the word in his voice the way you'd put a stone in a still pond. "You knew my parents." Pettigrew flinched. "I had no, you told Voldemort where they were," Harry said. "You had every choice and you made the worst one. And you've been running ever since." He held the man's gaze. The creature in Pettigrew's arms had gone very still in a way that had the quality of reconsidering. "I'm not going to let this ritual happen." "You can't," Harry looked at the cauldron. He could feel its magic, the prepared ritual circle, the gathered components, the bones were already there, the cauldron already heated. He reached out with the thing in his chest, found the ritual's structural magic, and unwound it. Not destroyed, dismantled. Like finding the knot in something and pulling the right thread. The cauldron went cold. The prepared components were inert. Pettigrew made a sound that was somewhere between a cry and a gasp. The creature in his arms hissed. "The blood of the enemy," it said, and its voice had shed the approximate human speech quality entirely now, running cold and sibilant, the snake language he'd heard in walls. "You will give it." Harry looked at it directly. It was, he had no good word for it. A diminished thing. Something that was power reduced to its own need, stripped of everything except the hunger to continue. He looked at it the way you look at something you are genuinely sorry for before you do what has to be done. "No," he said. In the same language. The creature recoiled. It had not expected Parseltongue. It had not expected to be understood. "You made Horcruxes," Harry said, still in the snake tongue, because this conversation was more honest in its native language. "You tore your soul to keep living. And what you're left with is this. And you still want more." "I want what was taken," it said. "You took it from others first," Harry said. "That's what was taken." A silence. Then Cedric, from behind him, "Harry. The Death Eaters, they'd been there in the periphery, he'd known they were there, the ring of them that had assembled during the exchange." He turned now to look at them fully. A dozen, possibly more. Masks. Dark robes. Wands raised with the hesitation of people who were waiting for an order that wasn't coming. "Your lord isn't getting a body tonight," Harry said, to the ring of them, conversationally. "Which means you're here for no reason. And I'm not interested in being here any longer than necessary." He looked around the ring. "Whoever wants to be first." Nobody moved. There is a specific kind of authority that comes from people who aren't afraid of you when they should be, and its effect on people who are used to fear as currency is immediate and total. The ring of Death Eaters had expected a frightened 14-year-old, and what they were looking at was something that had worked out. It wasn't afraid of them somewhere in the vicinity of age 9 and hadn't changed its mind since. Pettigrew bolted. Harry let him go. Tonks would find him, or the Aurors would, or the tracking charm he'd managed to land on Pettigrew's robes during the binding struggle would do its job. The creature in the grass where Pettigrew had dropped it made a sound like a small bitter wind and lay still. Not dead. Diminished. Reduced to a thing that required waiting again. Harry took the cup. He held it out to Cedric. "Hold on," he said. Cedric grabbed it. They were back on the Hogwarts grounds between one breath and the next, in the damp grass with the stands full of people who had been watching a dark maze and who turned now, collectively, to see two champions standing in the cup's landing zone, one of whom was Harry Potter with his wand raised and his eyes doing something that was not shock and not triumph but something more settled than either. The silence before the crowd noise was exactly half a second long. In that half second, Harry saw Tonks in the stands, standing at the railing, her hair gone stark white and her hands gripping the barrier and her magic up around her at full presence. She'd felt something through the bond, he knew that. she'd felt the graveyard and had been ready to come through the maze herself, or in training or not. Their eyes met. He gave her a small nod. She closed her eyes for 1 second. Then the crowd noise came in like a wave. The hours after were long and complicated and involved Dumbledore and Pomfrey and McGonagall and eventually a very senior Auror named Amelia Bones, who looked at Harry's account of the evening with the careful assessment of a very intelligent person verifying information they needed to be precise about. The creature's condition was confirmed: Voldemort, diminished, present but non-embodied, requiring new mechanisms to attempt corporealization. Pettigrew was recaptured by 11 the same evening, the tracking charm having done its job with the reliability of something cast under genuine motivation. Moody, or rather Bartemius Crouch Jr., who had been wearing Moody's face for a year in the specific and deeply unpleasant way of polyjuice potion sustained over time, was found in Moody's office by Dumbledore, who had worked it out from the texture of the evening. He was arrested and would be dealt with. Harry sat in the hospital wing at 2 in the morning with a cut on his arm where the headstone's explosion had caught him and a cup of tea that Pomfrey had made and which he was drinking in the systematic way of someone who had been told to drink it and found the instruction reasonable. Sirius came first. He came in fast and sat in the chair beside the bed and looked at Harry with the expression he'd been wearing more often lately, the one that was trying to be parental and discovering that it was considerably more complicated than expected because the person he was trying to parent had already handled most of the things parents were supposed to help with. The graveyard, Sirius said. He didn't get a body, Harry said. I know. I want to know if you're, Harry. He stopped. Started again. Are you all right? Yes, Harry said. Then, because it was serious and because honesty was more useful than performance, it was stranger than I expected. Looking at him. What's left of him? He thought about the creature in the grass and what he'd said to it in the snake tongue. He's so reduced. All that, and what he's left with is just need. Just hunger. He paused. It made me angry, and then it made me sad, and then I had to stop being sad and deal with the situation. Sirius rubbed his face. That's a very mature response to a traumatic event. The event wasn't traumatic, Harry said. I was prepared for it. Preparation isn't armor, I know, but it changes the quality of what you're dealing with. He drank some tea. The Horcruxes are more urgent now. He's going to try again. Different mechanism, but the goal is the same. Harry, I'm not asking to act immediately, Harry said. I know the timing isn't right. I know I'm 14. I'm saying the priority is clear and I'm going to hold it. He looked at Sirius. Are you all right? Sirius made a sound that was 1/3 a laugh. You're asking me, you look like someone who's been holding their breath for 3 hours, Harry said. I'm fine. You can exhale. Sirius exhaled. It was audible. I hate this, he said. The part where I can't be between you and nobody can be between me and this, Harry said, gently. That's the prophecy. That's the shape of it. But you can be here, and that matters. It matters differently, but it matters. Sirius looked at him. Your father never, he started. Then stopped. Then, he was brave. James. Genuinely brave. But he was never, he looked for the word. Prepared? Harry offered. Clear, Sirius said. He was never this clear. Harry thought about that. He thought about the pilot light and the 9 years in the cupboard in Andromeda's kitchen and Tonks saying I'm here on purpose and Lupin saying you're something I don't have a reference text for. He thought about what clarity costs and what it's made of. I had a different upbringing, he said simply. Sirius reached out and put his hand on the back of Harry's head for a moment in the gesture that Harry had worked out, over the last year, was Sirius's primary parental language when words weren't available. Then he sat back. Tonks is outside, Sirius said. She's been outside for an hour. Pomfrey won't let her in yet. Tell her to come in, Harry said. Pomfrey, Tell her to come in, Harry said, in the tone that Pomfrey had learned had a different kind of authority behind it than most of her patients. She came in. She came in the way she'd come into the Three Broomsticks at the start of this year, directed, purposeful, like weather arriving. But where she'd been burgundy-haired and professionally brisk then, now she was the flat colorless gray of someone who had been running on full focus for 3 hours and had only now been permitted to stop. She sat in the chair Sirius vacated, and Sirius said something about tea and left, and the room was quieter. She looked at him for a long time. Looked at the cut on his arm, which Pomfrey had dressed. Looked at his face. "The bond," she said. "I know," Harry said. "You felt it. From here. Through the maze. Through, whatever that was. The graveyard." Her voice was very steady in the way voices are when they're being held steady by effort. It went, she shook her head, cold, for a moment. Just a moment. Not you. The surrounding magic. Like something tried to, it couldn't, Harry said. The ritual didn't complete. I know that now. She pressed her hands together in her lap. In the moment I didn't. A pause. I was about to go in. I know, he said. The Aurors told me not to. I know, he said again. I was going anyway. I know, he said, and his voice was warmer on the third one, and she heard the warmth in it and her hair shifted from flat gray through several uncertain shades and settled on something soft and bronze. The Horcruxes, she said. Shacklebolt is, after tonight, after the confirmation that Voldemort is still an active force, the Auror Division is going to start treating this as a priority. She was back to her professional voice but it was gentler at the edges. He wants to work with Dumbledore. And he wants to include you. Good, Harry said. He said you'd say that. A small sound that was almost a laugh. He said, he wanted me to tell you that your tracking charm on Pettigrew was extremely well placed for someone in a graveyard under pressure. Tell him I'm available for debriefs, Harry said. She did laugh then, properly, and the sound of it was the most normal thing that had happened in the last 6 hours and he held it and let it do what normal things do after very abnormal evenings. She reached across and put her hand over his on the hospital bed. The magic went warm and still and steady. Not loud. Not the singing of the kitchen or the flickering lights of that first night. Just present. Just certain. I filed something, she said. He looked at her. Her hair was full amber now, warm and unhurried. Out of the when the time is appropriate folder. It's a small thing. Just, one thing. He waited. I'm glad it's you, she said. That's the thing. Whatever this is, the bond, the prophecy, all of it. I'm glad it's you in the middle of it. Not because someone has to be and it might as well be you. Because it's you and she paused. You're extraordinary, Harry. Not the scar, not the power, not the prophecy. You. The way you think. The way you're kind without being soft. The way you never stop moving forward. She met his eyes. I'm glad it's you. He thought about a 9-year-old in a rainstorm and the coal in his chest and the mug breaking clean and the lights. He thought about the word anchor and what it meant and what it was made of. So am I, he said. That it's you. She squeezed his hand once and then sat back and picked up the extra cup of tea Pomfrey had left and drank it, and they sat in the quiet hospital wing while the castle slept around them, and outside the window the June night was enormous and full of stars and the world had the particular quality of something that has just shifted into a new configuration, where old things have moved and new ones are settling into place. Harry drank his tea. Thought about 6 Horcruxes. Thought about the prophecy and what it required and what he intended to bring to the requirement. He was not afraid. He was ready in a way that was made of 4 years of specific work, and he was ready in a way that was made of something older and less nameable, something that lived in the marrow and the scar and the thing in his chest that had never once thought about going out. The night settled. The stars held. He was ready. Chapter 6, not yours to take. The summer after the Triwizard Tournament was the last quiet summer Harry Potter ever had, and he spent it well. Sirius had the house on Grimmauld Place open by July, not quiet, not comfortable, smelling of old magic and older neglect, with curtains that screamed when touched and a house elf who was deeply committed to his own unhappiness as a lifestyle choice, but open, and Harry's, in the specific way that places become yours when someone hands them over without conditions. He moved his things from Privet Drive in one trip. Vernon watched from the doorway with the expression of a man who had been waiting for this exit for 14 years and still didn't know how to feel about it arriving. Harry said goodbye without ceremony and got into the ministry car Sirius had arranged and didn't look back, not because he was performing indifference but because the rearview mirror held nothing he needed. Grimmauld Place in July was Sirius and Lupin and Tonks, on rotation from Auror training, which had intensified since June, and various Weasleys and Dumbledore's people arriving and departing in the serious, purposeful way of people who had decided that a war was coming and were choosing their positions. The Order of the Phoenix, reforming around the new shape of the threat, made the kitchen its headquarters. Harry sat at the kitchen table for most of those meetings. Nobody told him to leave and he didn't leave, and after the first 2 sessions where Moody had started to say something about children being present, Shacklebolt had said, with the measured authority of someone who had debriefed Harry personally and formed a view, he stays, and that had been the end of it. He listened. He asked questions when he had them and stayed quiet when he didn't. He cross-referenced what he heard with what he already knew, and the dark-covered notebook acquired several new sections. The Horcruxes were the central problem. 6 remaining. Dumbledore was already working on identification. He had theories, he said, at the first meeting where he laid out the full picture, and he said it looking at Harry with the acknowledgement of someone who had stopped pre-filtering information, which Harry appreciated. The theories were based on Voldemort's known history, his obsessions, the objects associated with the 4 Hogwarts founders. A locket. A cup. A diadem. A ring. The ring is the most urgent, Dumbledore said. I believe I know its location. I intend to retrieve it before term. Not alone, Harry said. The kitchen was quiet. Harry, Dumbledore said. I understand why you'd go alone, Harry said. You're significantly more capable than most available options. But a Horcrux is designed to be defended and to defend itself, and the intelligence value of a second person, someone who can pull you out if something goes wrong, is not negligible. He paused. I'm not asking to come. I'm saying you shouldn't go alone. Dumbledore looked at him for the long moment he'd been looking at Harry with increasing frequency over the last year, the one that was reassessment happening in real time. Who would you suggest? Lupin, Harry said. He's the most tactically sound person in this room and he has the fewest dependencies. Lupin, from his end of the table, looked at Harry with the expression he'd been wearing since 3rd year, the one that was trying to find a frame for what he was looking at and kept running out of frame. Then he looked at Dumbledore. He's right, he said. Dumbledore nodded, once, with the quality of someone who had been outmaneuvered in the gentlest possible way and found it not entirely unwelcome. Very well. They went 3 days later and came back with a ring in a conjured box and Dumbledore with a hand that was blackening at the fingers in a way that made Tonks, when she saw it, put her Auror training vocabulary to work in an impressive sequence. She healed what she could. Pomfrey, summoned urgently, healed more. The damage that remained was the kind that didn't fully heal, which Dumbledore accepted with the equanimity of someone who had made a calculation and stood by it. The stone in the ring, Dumbledore said, afterward, in the kitchen, with Lupin and Harry and Tonks present. It is significant. A separate matter. I need time to examine it. Harry looked at the box. He could feel the wrongness of the Horcrux from across the table, the same cold door quality, the draft of something fundamentally fractured. It's destroyed, he said. Yes. The soul fragment is gone. The stone remains. Dumbledore's eyes moved to Harry with something that was almost reluctance. There is a possibility, and I want to be honest with you about this, Harry, that the stone has properties that are relevant to people you've lost. Harry thought about green light and a door and a woman's voice. He thought about the resurrection stone and what that meant and what it cost. He looked at Dumbledore's blackened hand. "No," he said. Dumbledore blinked. "Whatever it offers," Harry said, "the cost is too high and what it gives back isn't real." He kept his eyes on Dumbledore. "I've thought about this. I've thought about my parents. I've thought about what I'd say and what they'd say and whether any version of that conversation, through an object that required everything that required, would be the thing I actually wanted." He paused. "It wouldn't be. It would be a shape of them. Not them." He looked at the box. "Destroy the stone." Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. "You are," he said, finally, very quietly, "a remarkable person, Harry." "I'm practical," Harry said. "It's the same thing from certain angles." Tonks, from beside him, pressed her knee briefly against his under the table. "Warmth, specific, there and gone. Fifth year arrived with Umbridge. She came in the particular way of institutional cruelty, dressed in pink, speaking sweetly, carrying the authority of the ministry behind her like a shield she planned to use as a weapon. She was the ministry's response to Dumbledore's assertions about Voldemort's return, which the ministry had decided to handle by refusing to acknowledge and dispatching someone to ensure Hogwarts aligned with the denial. Harry had her assessed within the first lesson. Not because he was looking for reasons to dislike her, he generally didn't look for reasons, he either found them or didn't. He assessed her the way he'd learned to assess threats, by their mechanisms, their goals, their vulnerabilities. Umbridge's mechanism was authority without accountability. Her goal was conformity. Her vulnerability was that her authority existed only as long as the institution supporting it held, and institutions, Harry had learned, were exactly as solid as the people willing to hold them up. "You will not be casting spells in my classroom," she said, on the first day, with the specific soft authority of someone who was accustomed to having their soft authority go unquestioned. "We're in defense class," Harry said. "Theory is the foundation. Theory without practice in defense produces students who can describe a reductor curse but not survive one," Harry said. "Not loudly. Not performing. Just stating what was accurate. Which means you're producing a generation of students who are less equipped to defend themselves during what is, by any reasonable assessment, an active threat period." He held her gaze. With respect. The class was very quiet. Umbridge's smile stayed on her face with the determined quality of something being maintained by effort. 5 points from Gryffindor for speaking without permission, Mr. Potter. "I'll accept that," Harry said. "But the assessment stands." She gave him detention. He went, and she had the blood quill ready, and when she explained what he was to write he looked at the implement and then at her with an expression that had no fear in it and said, "No." She blinked. "I'm not writing with that," he said. "I'd suggest you put it away before it becomes evidence in a ministry inquiry. Blood quills are Category B restricted objects and using them on minors is a significant legal exposure." He paused. "If you want attention, give me lines with a standard quill. I'll do them. If you want to have a conversation about Voldemort's return, I'll have it, though I don't expect it to be productive." He stood. "But I won't sit here and be injured for having an accurate assessment of reality." He left. She reported him to Dumbledore. Dumbledore received the report with the expression of someone who had already had a version of this conversation in his head and was now seeing how the real version compared. "She told you to use the blood quill?" Dumbledore said. "She had it on the desk," Harry said. "She didn't say the words, but yes." "I see." A pause, in which several things happened in Dumbledore's expression that were not visible in their details but were clear in their direction. "I'll speak with her. I'd also suggest telling her," Harry said, "that the students she's preventing from learning practical defense are going to be in the field within 3 years. Given what's coming." He looked at Dumbledore directly. "Is there a plan for practical defense instruction? Outside her class?" Dumbledore looked at him. "Did you have something in mind?" I could teach it, Harry said. Dumbledore looked at this from several angles. You're 15, he said. I have 5 years of intensive practice, a practical understanding of combat magic that most adults in this building don't have, and I've been in 3 genuine life-threatening magical confrontations. He paused. Age is one metric. It's not the only one. Dumbledore's eyes went warm in the way they did when he was genuinely, specifically pleased. Dungeon 5, he said. Saturday afternoons. I'll see that the appropriate access is arranged. Thank you, Harry said. He walked back through the castle thinking about lesson plans, and the thing in his chest was bright and directed and completely certain about everything it was certain about, which by now was considerable. Dumbledore's army had 42 members by October. They came for different reasons, some for the practical defense they weren't getting in class, some because of Harry's reputation, some because they were frightened and wanted to be less frightened, some because Neville Longbottom had said something to them with a quiet conviction that was more persuasive than volume. They ranged from 3rd year to 7th, and they had varying levels of prior ability, and Harry taught them all with the patience of someone for whom teaching was a natural extension of the thing he was, someone who thought carefully about how he did what he did and could therefore explain it. He was not a gentle teacher. Not unkind, never unkind, but he held them to what they were capable of and raised what they were capable of, and within 6 weeks the DA's average level of practical defense had moved several years ahead of where Umbridge's theory-based curriculum had placed them. Tonks came to 3 sessions. She sat in the back and watched and sometimes drilled with the students who needed an experienced partner, and twice she told Harry something useful about how he was explaining a specific technique, which he absorbed and adjusted. After the 3rd session, walking back through the castle toward the Gryffindor common room, she said, "You're a better teacher than 3 of the staff." Low bar, Harry said. Not as low as you'd think, she said. Shacklebolt watched your last session through the door for about 10 minutes. He didn't say anything when I asked him about it, which is his version of deeply impressed. He should come in, Harry said. He will, she said. He's been waiting to see if you're consistent. And? You're consistent, she said. There was warmth in it. She was in her aura colors, just finished with a training rotation, her hair a deep thoughtful amber. She'd been amber more often lately, and he'd begun to understand amber the way you understand a language that isn't yours but that you've been surrounded by long enough to feel. Amber was Tonks specific to him, not her default for anything, not a color she wore for the general world. Just this. They walked in comfortable silence through the 7th floor and down the moving staircases, and he thought about the fact that she was 17 now, had been 17 since early April, close to 18. He was 15. 3 years was still 3 years. He wasn't going to make it not be what it was. But the folder marked when the time is appropriate had been getting specific lately, and he had thoughts about what appropriate eventually looked like. He kept them where they were, warm and patient, and walked beside her. Umbridge found the DA in December. Harry had always known it was a risk. Had taken precautions, the coins, the protean charm that Hermione had found and adapted, the location changes, the vetting process for new members. But institutions with power and suspicion will find what they're looking for eventually, and Umbridge's informant, a girl named Marietta Edgecombe who had been frightened in a specific and human and ultimately understandable way, did what frightened people sometimes do. The DA was exposed. Dumbledore claimed responsibility with the serenity of a man who had made a decision and was fully committed to it, and in doing so drew Umbridge's fire from the students and from Harry specifically, and then left the castle in the manner of Dumbledore, which is to say, with a phoenix and considerable drama and the implicit promise that this was not permanent. Harry stood in the corridor outside the headmistress by appointment's new office and watched the ministry officials milling about with the expressions of people who had won something and weren't sure yet what it cost, and he felt a specific, cold clarity that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with consequence. The DA continued. They lost the formal venue but gained 3 informal ones, and the lessons went underground with the easy adaptability of people who had been taught to think about obstacles as navigable rather than terminal. Ron produced a cousin's map of unused classrooms. Hermione produced a schedule. Neville produced a security protocol that was more sophisticated than anything a 15-year-old had any reasonable right to have developed, and which Harry approved without modification because it was good. Umbridge, without Dumbledore to redirect her, turned her attention to Harry directly. This was, from a strategic standpoint, her significant error. She tried the educational decree approach. Harry was banned from Hogsmeade, from Quidditch, from extracurricular activities in a series of decrees that became progressively more specific and therefore progressively more difficult to enforce. Harry attended Quidditch practice and waited to see if she came to stop him. She didn't come personally, she sent a prefect. The prefect delivered the decree. Harry read it, identified the ministry seal as improperly formatted. He'd read enough ministry documents by now to recognize the format, and the decree had the wrong authorization code for a student restriction order, and told the prefect exactly that. The prefect was 15 and trying and went back to Umbridge with Harry's response. Umbridge came herself the next morning. She stood in the corridor with her clipboard and her pink cardigan and her expression of perfectly maintained authority and said, "The decree stands, Mr. Potter." "The decree has an invalid authorization code," Harry said. Decree 47B requires countersignature from the Board of Governors for application to named students. The board's signature isn't on it. He looked at her clipboard. "I checked the statute. Section 12, paragraph 4. Umbridge's smile did something around the edges. The ministry's authority to restrict individual students is procedurally bounded," Harry said. "If you want to ban me from Quidditch, you need the board's signature. Get it?" He paused. "I'll wait." She got it. It took 4 days. He played the match in the interim and Gryffindor won by 240 points, which he noted was not the point but also wasn't irrelevant. The vision came in March. He was in divination, a class he attended with the philosophical acceptance of someone who considered it 2 periods of relative peace in which he could read other things, when the connection he'd been aware of since childhood, the door with the draft, blew fully open for the first time. He saw a dark corridor. He saw his godfather. He saw Sirius, captive, in the Department of Mysteries. He knew it was a trap. He knew this with complete, specific certainty. Voldemort had shown him exactly what Voldemort needed him to see, which meant the vision was constructed rather than accidental, which meant going in would be walking directly into whatever Voldemort had arranged. He knew this. He went anyway. Not because he was fooled. He went because even a constructed trap required something, and the something it required was either Sirius himself or the prophecy or both, and he needed to know which before he could work out the right response, and the only way to know which was to go. He also went with preparation. He took the day. Specifically, Ron, Hermione, Neville, Ginny, and Luna Lovegood, who had heard the plan and said, with the serene certainty that was Luna's primary communication mode, "I'll come. I expect it will be important that I'm there," and Harry had looked at her and said, yes, because he'd learned that Luna's certainties had a specific track record. He told Tonks before he went. She was at Hogwarts for a training session with some of the 6th years, and he found her in the defense classroom with 20 minutes before they were leaving and he told her directly what was happening and what he was planning. She looked at him. Her hair went white. "You know it's a trap," she said. "Yes. And you're going." "Yes." "Harry, Sirius is either there or he's the mechanism," Harry said. "If he's there I need to get him out. If he's the mechanism I need to know what for before I can disrupt it." He held her eyes. "I need you to tell Shacklebolt. Get the Aurors moving toward the ministry. Not to stop me going in, to be there for the back end." She stared at him. Her magic was up around her, the warm specific presence of it, and he could feel through the bond that she was working through anger and fear and something more complicated, working through it fast with the compressed efficiency she developed over the last 2 years of training. "You are the most," she started. "I know," he said. "I'm coming." "You'll blow the op," Harry said. "If you come in with me, your presence changes the balance. They're expecting me and potentially 5 students. An aura in training with a fidelitas bond to the target changes their calculations in ways we don't know. He kept his voice steady. Shacklebolt. Outside. Be the back end. She looked at him for a long count. Her hair moved through white to gray to the deep burgundy of focused certainty. You come back, she said. I come back, he said. That's not a request. I know, he said. She stepped forward and kissed him. Not the quick cheek kiss of a 9-year-old's gratitude, something deliberate and brief and entirely clear about what it was. She stepped back before he had fully processed it, and her eyes were bright and steady, and she said, now you have a reason to be definite about it. He stood in the defense classroom for 1 full second. Then he said, call Shacklebolt, and left, and the warmth in his chest was so specific and so certain that it felt like it had always been moving toward exactly this moment. The Department of Mysteries was real and dark and strange in the way that places are strange when they've been built around things that aren't supposed to be touched. The corridor of prophecies was enormous, rows and rows of glass spheres glowing faintly in the dark, a whole archive of possible futures that nobody had asked to have captured. Sirius was not there. Harry had expected this. He'd said to Ron on the way in the lift, descending, he won't be here. This is about the prophecy. And it was, the sphere labeled with his name and Voldemort's, sitting in its rack in row 97, which Harry found in under 4 minutes because he knew what it was labeled and the labels were visible. He picked it up and looked at it. It showed nothing from the outside, just a grey mist, contained, the recorded moment of Sybil Trelawney making a prediction she likely didn't remember making. We should leave, Hermione said, from beside him. Yes, Harry said. They turned. The Death Eaters were there. 12 of them, stepping from the shadows between the shelves with the practiced emergence of people who had been waiting and were pleased with their timing. Their leader, masked, tall, a woman whose voice Harry recognized even muffled, said, "Give us the prophecy, Potter." Harry looked at the sphere in his hand. He looked at the ring of Death Eaters. He looked at his 5 friends, ranged behind him in the narrow aisle, varying degrees of ready but all of them present and none of them breaking. He looked at the woman. "Bellatrix Lestrange," he said. She pulled her mask off with a theatrical flourish. "The boy knows my name." "You tortured the Longbottoms," Harry said. His voice was level. Neville, behind him, had gone very still and very rigid in the way of someone containing something enormous. Frank and Alice Longbottom, into insanity, for information they didn't have. He let a pause land. "Neville's here, by the way." Bellatrix's eyes slid to Neville. Something complicated moved through her expression, not guilt, she'd long excised guilt as a functional state, but something like the adjustment of someone who hadn't planned for a specific variable. "How sweet," she said. "Give us the prophecy," said another voice, Lucius Malfoy, unmasked now, with the impeccable tailoring and absolute certainty of someone whose confidence had never been tested against something it couldn't buy. "And we'll let your friends leave. You have my word." "Your word," Harry said, "has a specific track record. You planted a Horcrux on a 12-year-old girl to open a chamber of basilisks. Your word is a mechanism, not a commitment." He looked at the prophecy in his hand. "You want this. Give it to us," Malfoy said. "What happens if I drop it?" Harry said. A very specific silence. "The prophecy shatters," Harry said. "And whatever it contains is gone. Not in Death Eater hands, not retrievable." He held the sphere casually, the way you hold something that might need to be released quickly. "So the question is, what's your leverage? You can't kill me, you need me functional to carry it out of here. You can hurt my friends, which I'd like to prevent, but if you hurt my friends I drop this and the whole evening costs you everything." He looked around the ring. "Your move." Bellatrix hissed something, and 3 Death Eaters moved in 3 directions simultaneously. Harry didn't wait. He moved first. What followed in the Hall of Prophecy was not a clean or simple sequence of events. It was a battle in a space full of breakable things containing other people's futures, and the sound of prophecies shattering as spells went wrong and missed was like a whole archive of possible lives unmade, which Harry found genuinely awful and kept in the back of his head as motivation to end this quickly. His magic in combat was something he'd spent 5 years developing past the point of instinctive application into something precise and devastating. He didn't fire wildly, he targeted specifically, disabled rather than killed where possible, and moved with the spatial awareness of someone who had been thinking about three-dimensional combat since third year. Neville fought with a ferocity that surprised the Death Eaters considerably more than it surprised Harry. Luna fought with the calm decisiveness of someone for whom the physical world was one layer of a larger reality and physical danger therefore held less terror. Ron and Ginny covered each other with the natural synchrony of siblings who had spent years navigating shared danger. Hermione was methodical and fast and exactly who she was in every situation, which was the most useful possible person. They lost ground. They gained it back. Hermione went down, hit by a curse from Dolohov that wasn't fatal but made her unconscious and made Harry's magic lurch in the specific way it lurched when she was hurt, which was different from the bond response but ran alongside it. Ron took a hit to the legs that had him down for several minutes before he found an aisle shelf to use for support. They made it to the circular room. Then to the elevator. Then up, and the Ministry's grand atrium opened around them, vast and golden and empty at this hour. Except for the Order. Coming through the flow points at the far end, Lupin and Moody, Shacklebolt and Tonks and Kingsley and 3 others Harry didn't immediately identify, arriving with the coordinated precision of people who had been moving since the moment they got a signal. Tonks came through the flow and her eyes found Harry immediately across the atrium and whatever she read in what she saw made her magic spike so sharply that the nearest decorative fountain sent a brief column of water sideways. "The students first," Harry said, loud enough to carry, meaning, "Get my people clear before you engage." Shacklebolt made a gesture to 2 of his people and they moved to do exactly that, and then the Order and the Death Eaters were engaging across the full width of the Ministry atrium and it was a different kind of battle, professionals against professionals, full Order versus Voldemort's inner circle, and the quality and weight of it was significantly higher than the Hall of Prophecy. Harry moved through it. Not to help the Order, they were handling it. He moved with specific purpose, tracking Bellatrix through the battle, because Bellatrix had escaped and escaped and escaped for the last 5 years and the damage she'd done was irreversible and she was going to escape again if he didn't. He came around a pillar and found her laughing. She was laughing in the way of someone who had just done something that had made them very happy, and she was looking at the space where Sirius had been standing. The veil. Harry looked at the archway in the center of the atrium. The veil moved, faintly. He stood still for 1 second. Just one. He thought about the resurrection stone and what he'd said and what he meant by it. He thought about shapes of people versus people. He thought about Sirius's hand on the back of his head and there is nothing in the world I want more. Then he looked at Bellatrix. "He was my godfather," he said. Bellatrix spun, still laughing, wand up. She said something sharp and vicious and cast, and Harry was already not where he'd been, moving with the reflexive spatial instinct that had kept him alive in 3 genuine combat situations, and the curse hit the pillar behind him and the pillar cracked. He cast back. Not a killing curse. He'd thought about that choice, thought about it carefully, in the deliberate way he thought about important things, and decided it wasn't his and he wasn't going to take it up. But he had a long vocabulary of magic that didn't kill and that was sufficient for this, and he used it with a precision that Bellatrix, who was brilliant and terrifying and operating on the sustained fury of a fanatic, hadn't been prepared for because she was accustomed to opponents who were either afraid of her or in the grip of their own fury. He was neither. He was very clear and very specific and the magic behind his wand had the weight of 5 years of deliberate building. She went down. Not dead, incapacitated thoroughly, the kind that would require Azkaban to hold and Pomfrey-level healing to undo. He stood over her and took her wand and put it in his pocket and turned around. Voldemort was there. Not the creature from the graveyard. Something more, not fully formed, not what he'd been at his height, but significantly more than the diminished thing in the grass. A body, half reconstructed, sourced from some other mechanism than the ritual Harry had stopped. Paler than pale, with the quality of something assembled rather than born. The snake's eyes, the absence of nose, the presence of something in the air around him that was cold and wrong, and the draft under the door made manifest. The Death Eaters had all stopped. The Order had all stopped. The atrium was completely still except for the moving water of the fountain and the faint flutter of the veil from somewhere behind them. Voldemort looked at Harry. Harry looked back. "Boy," Voldemort said. "Tom," Harry said. A small, precise pause. The snake eyes narrowed. "You would do well to, I know your name," Harry said. "I know what you were before you were this. I know about the orphanage and the cave and the ring and the diary and everything you built and everything you destroyed to build it." He kept his voice even. Not taunting, explaining. "I know what the prophecy says. I know what it requires. And I know that you can't finish this tonight because the Horcruxes aren't all gone, and until they're all gone the prophecy's conditions aren't met." He tilted his head fractionally. "You know this too. Which means tonight is posturing." Something moved in Voldemort's expression. Displeasure, cold and deep. "You presume, I presume things that are accurate," Harry said. "You can't kill me tonight. Not because you're weak, you're not, or not entirely, but because killing me while your soul is still fragmented just moves the problem." He paused. "You need me at the end. I know that. You know that. So we're both here in this atrium and neither of us can finish what needs finishing tonight." He looked at the snake eyes directly. "So end it." A silence that had weight. Voldemort raised his wand. Harry raised his. The duel that followed lasted 45 seconds and was, for those watching, the most extraordinary 45 seconds in the Ministry Atrium's long history. Voldemort was exactly what he was, a practitioner of 4 decades of the darkest and most sophisticated magic, a mind of genuine brilliance applied entirely to destruction, operating at the very peak of whatever his reconstructed body allowed. He was formidable and terrible, and the spells he cast had the quality of things built for the express purpose of ending things permanently. Harry was 15 years old and had 5 years of deliberate preparation and 4 years of genuine combat experience and a bond to something ancient and specific that added a warmth and certainty to his magic that Voldemort's borrowed body could not match, physically recoiling from the direct magical contact the way Andromeda's diagnostic spell had noted, way back, in 1989. Which Harry had understood intellectually but was now feeling in practice as his magic met Voldemort's and simply refused to yield ground. Not because Harry was stronger. He wasn't, yet. He was holding ground because his magic had something in it that Voldemort's didn't and had never had, and had in fact specifically destroyed in himself when he made the choices that made him what he was, something warm and chosen and present, something that burned from a specific and unbreakable source. The 45 seconds ended when Dumbledore arrived. He came through the floor with the quality of Dumbledore arriving, like weather, like inevitability, and what followed between him and Voldemort was, for Harry, like watching two players of the same game at entirely different levels, the gap between them measurable and vast. Harry stepped back. He wasn't needed here, not now. He watched and learned and stood with his wand at his side and the warmth in his chest steady and bright. Voldemort went. Not defeated, not destroyed, not with the Horcruxes intact, but gone, operating from the Ministry in the smoke and cold of a departure that had the quality of a decision rather than a rout. Tactical withdrawal. The atrium was quiet. Dumbledore turned to look at Harry. His expression was the most open Harry had ever seen it, all the careful management stripped down to something underneath it, something that was simply this old man looking at this boy and seeing the full shape of what he was looking at. "Are you?" Dumbledore started. "I'm fine," Harry said. Serious, a pause. The quality of the pause carried everything it needed to. Harry looked at the veil. He was quiet for a moment. The warmth in his chest was steady and present, and he used it the way he used it, held it, drew on it, let it be the thing that kept him upright when the weight was considerable. "All right," he said. Not loudly. Not performing. Just the fact, accepted, already being carried. Tonks was beside him before he turned around. She was there the way she'd been there since the start, not in his way, not managing him, just present, which was its own particular form of everything. Her hand found his and he held it and felt the bond settle around them like something that had been partially held breath for the last 4 hours exhaling fully. He did not cry in the ministry atrium. He cried later, in private, as anyone would, with the specific grief of losing the first person who had been unreservedly his. He let it be what it was and didn't try to make it smaller or larger. Tonks sat with him through it and said nothing, and her hand stayed in his, and the warmth that ran between them was not a comfort that falsified the grief but a presence that made it survivable, which was a different and more honest kind of help. The ministry could not, after the night of the Department of Mysteries, maintain its position on Voldemort's return. Fudge had been in the atrium. Had seen. Denial requires not seeing, and he had seen, and the political architecture of the ministry's chosen reality had come down around him in the specific way of structures built on false foundations, not gradually, but all at once. By the end of June, Fudge was out. The ministry was reorganizing with the particular urgent energy of an institution discovering it has been wrong about something important and needing to be seen doing something about it. Scrimgeour came in, cautious, political, more substance than Fudge but not without his own calculations. Harry met Scrimgeour at King's Cross, at the end of term. Scrimgeour had arranged to be there. He had a proposal, carefully constructed, delivered with the practiced warmth of a man who had been making proposals for years. He wanted Harry's public endorsement. Harry as visible symbol of ministry support, Harry seen at ministry events, Harry's name associated with the ministry's new messaging on the war. Harry listened to the whole thing. Then he said, "No." Scrimgeour blinked. "I think if you want the symbol," Harry said. "You want the name and the scar and the idea of Harry Potter associated with ministry credibility that needs rebuilding. I understand the logic." He looked at Scrimgeour steadily. "But the ministry has spent the last year trying to undermine the information I was trying to communicate about an active threat, deploying a ministry official to harm students who were learning to defend themselves, and failing to act on intelligence reports about Death Eater activity that my Auror contacts submitted correctly through proper channels." He paused. "What I'm willing to do is help win this war. What I'm not willing to do is be a management tool for institutional reputation." Scrimgeour's jaw went tight. "You're 15. 16 in 3 weeks, Harry said. "Not that it's relevant." "Potter, I'll fight this war," Harry said. "I'll find the Horcruxes and I'll do what the prophecy requires and I'll do it with or without ministry support. What I won't do is pretend the ministry's been doing its job when it hasn't." He held the man's gaze. "If the ministry wants to be useful, it can provide Shacklebolt's Auror Division with the resource allocation they've been requesting since September, and it can establish a proper channel for intelligence from Dumbledore's people. That would help." A pause. "The endorsement photo opportunity wouldn't." Scrimgeour looked at him for a long moment. He was a man accustomed to political leverage, accustomed to finding the fulcrum in any conversation and pressing it. He was looking for the fulcrum in this one and there wasn't one. Harry had no career ambitions that could be threatened, no relationships the ministry controlled, no fear of institutional disapproval. "I see," Scrimgeour said, with the careful neutrality of a man recalibrating. "You're very sure of yourself." "I'm very sure of what I need to do," Harry said. "That's different." He stepped back. "The offer about the Auror Division resourcing stands. Good afternoon." He walked back to the Weasleys, where everyone was waiting, and Ron immediately said, "How'd it go?" and Harry said, "Fine," and Tonks, standing slightly apart, caught his eye with an expression that asked the question more specifically. He gave her the small nod. She gave him the small nod back, and her hair went amber, and Sirius's absence sat in the space between them with all its weight, and they were both present for it without flinching. The summer before 6th year was different from the quiet summer before 5th. It was working summer, the kind that felt like building something, the Horcrux research gaining shape and specificity as Dumbledore's work and Hermione's work and Shacklebolt's intelligence contributions converged into actual leads. The locket. The cup. The diadem. The snake. And the last one, the one that took Dumbledore until August to say, quietly, in the kitchen at Grimmauld Place with Harry and Lupin and Tonks present, the one that had been made that night in Godric's Hollow. Harry sat with this information for a long time. Part of his soul, Dumbledore said carefully, fragmented and attached to yours on the night of the curse. Involuntarily, it wasn't intended. He looked at Harry with the eyes that had been looking at him for 5 years with increasing honesty. There is a possibility that to destroy this fragment, I know, Harry said. Harry, Lupin said. I know, Harry said again. I've known for a while. I've felt it, the door. The connection to him. It's not only the scar. He looked at Dumbledore. Is there any other way? A pause. Honest. I don't know yet. Keep looking, Harry said. Yes, Dumbledore said. I will. Tonks walked with Harry in the Grimmauld Place garden afterward, in the late August evening, the last of the day's warmth still in the bricks and the sky going the deep blue of almost night. He told her. All of it. He told her the way he told her things, directly, without softening, because she was the person he didn't soften things for. She listened. She didn't flinch. She held his hand and walked with him, and her magic was up around her at the warm specific level it held when she was fully present for him, and when he finished she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, he's still looking. Yes. And you trust him to look properly. More than I did, Harry said. He's been honest for the last year. He'll keep being honest. He paused. I'm not going to just give up and walk into it. That's not the plan. What's the plan? She asked. Find all the others first. Destroy them. Then work out this one with better information than we have now. He paused. And in the meantime, live. Properly. Not as if every day might be the last. Because that's just letting Voldemort win differently. Tonks stopped walking. She turned to face him, and she was amber in the last light, warm and specific and entirely hers, and she was looking at him with the expression that had been moving from the filed under appropriate to the present tense for the last year, the one that no longer had any distance in it. When you turned 16, she said. 2 weeks ago, Harry said. And I'm 18 in April. She said it the way she'd said all the important things, directly, without the performance that distance requires. I know, he said. The folder, she said. I know, he said again. She kissed him, properly this time, with all the time in the world and all the intention she'd been filing for 4 years. The warmth in his chest went absolutely still and then expanded, slow and certain, the way a coal goes from burning to radiating, filling everything outward in every direction, and somewhere in the deepest physics of whatever the bond was it recognized this the same way it had recognized the kitchen in 1989, except 4 years older and 5 years more deliberate and entirely, completely, specifically right. She pulled back and looked at him. Her hair was the amber he'd learned to read as meaning him, specifically him, nothing else. Her eyes were dark and warm and completely present. Still here on purpose, she said. I know, he said, for the 3rd time, which was the number that meant he'd fully understood something. He had been fully understanding this for a long time. The war went on. They found the Horcruxes one by one over the course of 6th and 7th year, and each one cost something, time and risk, and twice, blood, and once a month in tea. Mungos that Harry did not enjoy and would never fully describe. They fought battles that were not the neat duels of textbooks but the messy, costly, real thing, with consequences that didn't reset when the chapter ended. Voldemort came to full power in Harry's 7th year. He took the Ministry. He took Hogwarts. He took the country in the grinding, systematic way of someone who had been patient for a very long time and was no longer willing to be patient. Harry didn't hide. He never hid. He moved through the country with Hermione and Ron and Tonks and Shacklebolt's network, finding the last pieces of what needed to be found, and every Death Eater who came for him came for someone who wasn't afraid and wasn't hiding and was entirely willing to be found. The last Horcrux, the fragment in the scar, turned out to have a solution that Dumbledore found in his last healthy winter before the injury that had been accumulating since the ring took its toll. The solution was not death. It was the opposite of death, a specific and ancient magic, the same order of magic that had protected Harry as an infant, that could extract and contain a soul fragment without destroying the host. It required someone to perform it who had the right combination of magical knowledge and power. It required Harry to hold still while it happened, which was the hardest part, in the specific way that allowing things to happen to you is harder than doing things. Tonks performed it. She was the only person with both the knowledge, 5 years of post-training specialization in Aura Division restricted magic, and the bond connection that gave her the access to Harry's magical core that the spell required. She performed it in the kitchen at Grimmauld Place on a Tuesday morning in March with Hermione watching and Lupin standing by with his wand as secondary and Harry sitting in a chair being extremely still. It took 11 minutes. It was unpleasant. The fragment came out as a cold grey wisp that Tonks contained in a spelled flask and destroyed immediately and thoroughly, and Harry sat in the chair afterward with his scar tingling and the door under the draft of his awareness simply gone. Not slammed. Just absent. Like a tooth that had ached for so long you'd forgotten it ached until it stopped. He exhaled. Done, Tonks said. She was slightly pale, the way she went after heavy magical expenditure, and her hair had gone flat grey-white with effort. She held his face in her hands and looked at him with the focused healer's check that she'd developed in the last 2 years of specialization. Harry. With me? With you, he said. She exhaled. Her forehead dropped to his for a moment. Her hands were warm. Right, she said, pulling back, being professional, being the Auror. Right. That's done. Now we go finish it, Harry said. The final battle was at Hogwarts. It came there the way endings come to their proper places, with a kind of inevitability that didn't feel inevitable until it was happening, and then felt exactly right. Harry walked out to meet Voldemort in the courtyard with the castle at his back and the Order and the DA and 3 years of war at his back and the scars silent on his forehead for the first time in his life. Voldemort looked at him across the stones. Harry looked back. The Horcruxes were all gone. The conditions of the prophecy were met. What stood between them now was just this, the thing that had been moving toward this moment since a Halloween night 16 years ago, the shape of a choice that had been made when Harry was 1 year old and was now being completed. Harry felt the bond. Warm, specific, certain. Felt it the way you feel your own heartbeat when you're paying attention, not loud, not performed, just there and constant and entirely real. The prophecy, Voldemort said, across the courtyard. Yes, Harry said. One of us, I know what it says, Harry said. I've known for 2 years. Voldemort's wand came up. Harry's came up. And this time, without the Horcruxes, without the fractured protection of a shattered soul, what Voldemort's magic met was the full weight of everything Harry was, a boy who had been building since 9 years old, who had been training since 11, who had been fighting since 12 and who had a bond to something ancient and chosen and alive that ran through his magic the way bedrock runs through earth. Not a tool, not a prophecy's instrument. A person. A specific, irreducible, unchosen except by everything important person. The killing curse came. He stepped aside, and the disarming charm that followed it took Voldemort's wand from his hand with the clean economy of someone who had practiced this exact sequence and knew exactly where the exchange point was, and Voldemort's borrowed body looked at its empty hand, and then at Harry, and the snake eyes held something that might have been, at the very last, a version of understanding. Then it was over. Not with noise or drama. Just over. The body folded. The cold in the air released. The bond in Harry's chest went from burning to something deeper and quieter, the warm embers of something that had completed what it was for and was still there, still burning, would always burn, because it wasn't conditional on the threat it had been built to outlast. Harry stood in the courtyard and breathed. Around him, the castle. The walls and towers and centuries of gathered magic and the particular specific quality of a place that had known him for 6 years and had chosen to know him back. Behind him, his people. Ron and Hermione, Neville and Ginny and Luna. Lupin and Shacklebolt. The DA and the Order and every person who had decided that choosing a side meant something more than safety. And Tonks, crossing the courtyard through the dispersing crowd, amber-haired and steady and coming directly toward him the way she always came toward him, with purpose, without performance, just herself moving toward himself. She reached him and she looked at him with the dark warm eyes that had been the specific and particular face of this whole thing since it started, and she said nothing because there was nothing that needed saying, and he held her and the warmth that had lived in his chest since he was 9 years old went fully outward and met hers and it was quiet and whole and completely real. Behind them, the castle. The living stones. The old magic settling. Around them, people beginning to understand that the war was over. Above them, the sky opening out of gray into something cleaner, the clouds breaking apart and the May morning light coming through in long slow shafts, falling on the stones and the water and the grounds and the faces of people who had survived something enormous and were standing in it and beginning, carefully, to be glad. Harry Potter stood in the courtyard of Hogwarts with the woman his magic had chosen before his mind had the words for choosing and looked at the world the way you look at something you have fought for completely and now hold, not without cost, not without loss, not without the permanent specific weight of everything it took. But his. Freely, fully, finally his. He was not afraid. He had never been afraid. He was home.